pro-life incrementalist versus abortion abolitionist to some degree, and some of the things that are going on there. So there is like a debate aspect, and we have no fear of debate. But for me, I think the most important thing is for people to sit down and try, debate, discuss, iron sharpen iron, all that kind of stuff. And it can be even ferocious at times if you want it to be. But as long as both sides are trying to figure out what's true, and neither side is trying to just win a debate, I think we do end up producing something fruitful here. And people can watch, and even if they don't go either direction or they don't change their mind, they go, you know what? I understand it better. And no one sitting in this video was just trying to like zing the other person with a gotcha.
With all that said, let's kind of get into it here. So for those following along, if you were following on Twitter, you would have seen kind of some back and forth between Joel. I think we jumped in on that a little bit, but mostly between Joel and kind of a lot of abolitionists about the question of, should the mother who is having the abortion, who's either paying for the abortion or paying for the abortion pill, or however she's doing it, should she be prosecuted? And so that was kind of a big deal on Twitter recently, and which kind of got us talking to Joel, talked about us having this podcast to talk more about it. And so why don't we just kind of kick this off? Joel, we'll hand you the floor to just kind of define your position, and maybe give a few kind of basic reasons for it, and then we'll do the same, and then it'll just be completely free-flowing from there. So why don't you kick us off by kind of explaining what your position on this subject is?
Okay. So yeah, I think the one thing that I think is important to distinguish when we're having this conversation that I think gets lost or obfuscated with a lot of the back and forth is, to me, the main distinction between the abolitionist side and the pro-life side is whether or not the mother should be prosecuted. Incrementalism is another side issue, but it seems like the main issue is whether or not the mother should be prosecuted for murdering her baby. And I don't like that obviously it's very clever branding to take the term abolitionist, but I don't think it there's something that feels a little bit dishonest about it to me, because that's pro-lifers want to abolish abortion too, and obviously your retort would be, well, you don't want to abolish it for the woman. But I would say we want to abolish it for the woman too. We want to make it illegal everywhere. We want to make it impossible to get an abortion. But our only difference is in terms of the level of severity with which we should treat the mother who gets an abortion, in my mind. I think so. I have a few I divided it into kind of three categories. Three main areas for why I hold this pro-life view. The first is a legal case, the second is a moral case, and then the second is just a very practical case. And I'll kind of just lay these out very broadly from 5,000 feet. We can get into more details later, because I'm sure you'll have questions. But as far as the legal case goes, I think that there is a lot of confusion sometimes between, what our judicial system does, what our justice system does in passing out different levels of sentences for different levels of evil, and partiality. So, obviously we see this in the justice system already. Premeditated murder is worse than, murder in the heat of the moment. A serial killer is going to get a worse punishment than a guy who gets in a fist fight and accidentally knocks someone out and kills them. So there's already in our legal system, as you guys already acknowledged, there's already some level of, there's different levels of evil that receive different punishments, even though the value of that human life that was lost is the same. So, even though someone who kills someone accidentally or kills someone in the heat of the moment might get a lesser sentence than someone who's a serial killer, we're not saying that victim is worth less. We're not sentencing based on the value of the victim. We're sentencing based on the heinousness of the crime. So, legally speaking, I think you look at ancient law, and you can kind of see this in Middle Eastern Islamic countries a little bit still today. It was very cut and dry, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. It's what you read in the Bible. You've heard it said, eye for an eye, tooth for tooth. And then Jesus came, and he talked to us about the inner life and the motives behind. Man looks on the outward appearance, but God sees the heart. And suddenly, I think what ended up working into our common law in Western civilization was this idea of not just cutting off an arm because someone took an arm, cutting out an eye because someone took out an eye, killing someone because someone killed somebody. But now in our law, we take into account the inner life, what was going through their mind and their heart, what their motives were, and we take that into account when we sentence people. Now, speaking specifically about the women, I think that studies show about 10% of abortions are coerced, according to polls. Another 50 to 60% of abortions, women report later that it wasn't coerced, but it was against their morals, and they would have preferred to do something differently, which to me still speaks to a certain level of coercion. Either they were going to have their support cut off, they were going to be kicked out of their home by their boyfriend, they were scared, they were vulnerable, they didn't want to do this, and they felt they had no other option. I think that the state of a woman who just became a mother is extremely fragile. It's extremely vulnerable. There are hormones involved. And I think, I think all of those things, those inner life things, need to be taken into account when we sentence a mother for murdering her child. And I'll never shy away from saying it's murder. So here's the other thing. I often see abolitionists say that if you treat women differently than a woman who kills her baby differently than a man who kills her baby, that's the sin of partiality, which is explicitly condemned in scriptures. I hear a lot in these debates, the term unequal weights and measures. And I think there's a little confusion on the word there, because partiality, the definition of partiality is, I actually wrote it down here somewhere. Yeah, okay, so the definition of partiality is unfair bias or unjust bias in favor of one thing or one person compared to another. So, in other words, bias in favor of one person or another is not necessarily partiality. It's only partiality if that bias is unfair or unjust. And like I said earlier, we already kind of treat certain people differently in our justice system, in our culture, not in a partiality way, but just because treating certain people differently is sometimes the most just and equal thing to do. An example is the military draft. We don't treat men and women equally in the military draft. We don't draft women. Men's and women's sports, well, this used to be the case, like maybe not so much anymore, but, women shouldn't be drafted into men's sports because they could get extremely hurt. We have separate bathrooms for men and women. You have this idea that kind of evolved over 2,000 years since the Greeks and Jesus, this idea of chivalry. This women are no longer chattel, that men are here to use their power and strength to protect and honor and lift up women. This idea of chivalry. So, those are, to me, are all examples of ways that we treat people differently based on the fact that they're women, or but for just reasons. Does that make sense? So it's not necessarily partiality to treat people differently. That kind of sums up the legal case. The moral side of things, and maybe we'll spend more time on this because this is much more interesting to me than the legal case. I think the moral side and the biblical side, what God says, is the foundation of all this and should be the foundation of all this. I think that when a lot of abolitionists, what a lot of abolitionists call partiality is what I would call mercy. So when we're talking about prosecuting a woman who has killed her baby, I mean, she has committed murder. It's a crime. It's sin. It's evil. A human life has been taken. I believe for several reasons, the legal reasons that I've just listed, as well as some other moral reasons that I'll get into in a minute, that that in that case, mercy is appropriate for that woman. And I think that is different than partiality. So the retort that I get a lot from abolitionists is like, well, what about mercy for the baby? My answer to that is that the baby doesn't need mercy because the baby is innocent. Mercy, the textbook definition of mercy is withholding punishment from someone to whom it is due. So we're talking about someone who deserves punishment, and you withhold punishment from them. That is what mercy is. And
Sure.
Micah 6:8 gives us this really hard verse that is kind of a paradox that's really, really difficult to reconcile. We're told to do justice and love mercy. Well, what does that mean? How does one do both? I don't know. I don't know how that works itself out in the legal system or in our lives. I think it's something that we're meant to wrestle with. But I do think that we're meant to love mercy, and I don't see how we can love mercy without sometimes giving mercy to people. I think when we look in the Bible, we see a lot of really strong examples of mercy. We have this story, which I know some people there's arguments over whether this is canonical or not. The woman who was caught in adultery. Where Jesus, not excusing her sin, he said, "Go and sin no more." He also said, "Neither do I condemn you," and he saved this woman from judicial punishment that was maybe due to her in the letter of the law. One of my favorite examples is the Apostle Paul. I mean, Paul the Apostle was a murderer. He killed saints in the church. And he facilitated the persecution of Christians. And God not only saved him, he spared him and used him to write most of the New Testament and help found our faith and bring the gospel to the Gentiles. And Paul spoke about this very thing. He said, "Though formerly I was a blasphemer, persecutor, and insolent opponent, but I received mercy because I had acted ignorantly and in unbelief." And I think that brings up another important point that, there is a biblical case to be made for showing someone mercy, even judicial mercy, when they act ignorantly or in unbelief. And we, as you well know, our justice system already accounts for this. If someone didn't know what they were doing, there are times that we show mercy. The other example, the classic example is Jesus on the cross. He said, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." The other example of the woman who anointed Jesus, the Pharisees is this woman who was a sinner that, I guess tradition says she was a prostitute. The Pharisees said, if this man were a prophet, he would know what kind of woman is touching him. He would know what kind of woman she is because she's a sinner. And I think about the fact that Jesus knew everything that this woman had ever done, which I'm speculating here, could possibly include some criminal, acts, and the mercy that he showed her. Even then, he knew what everyone had ever done. I mean, think about Jesus. Everyone who he ever interacted with, he knew every crime and probably murder that they had ever committed.
Right.
And all I see time after time after time in Jesus and his interactions with people and the way he behaved with people is just this overwhelming mercy. I'm not saying that should be automatically transferred over to our judicial system and we should just show everybody mercy. I mean, obviously, right. We see the horrible damage that does with George Soros, his DAs in these liberal cities where criminals are going free.
Right.
But there's a balance there. Yeah. And I promise I'm wrapping this up soon. Yeah. I know I'm probably going a little long.
So you still got practical, brother.
So the other side of the moral argument for me is this idea of complementarianism, or male headship. I think that's an important factor to consider in this whole argument. The Bible talks about how Eve was deceived, not the man. The Bible tells husbands to show honor to his wife as unto the weaker vessel. There's a lot to say in the Bible about male headship and responsibility. I think that men are most culpable in abortion when it comes to the abortion industry, when it comes to the lawyers and activists who actually argued for Roe versus Wade back in 1973, when it comes to the hookup culture that puts women in this position to need an abortion or want an abortion. This is first and foremost, in my opinion, a grave sin of men who have been weak, who have failed to lead and failed to protect women as they should. And God holds us accountable for that as men. I mean, when the New Testament talks about Adam, it says Adam is the one who brought sin into the world. The Bible says, by one man, sin entered the world, and death through sin. Eve was the first person to eat the fruit, but God holds the man responsible for that. Yep. And so I think there's a biblical case to be made for pointing a graver responsibility and punishment on the man than on the women in these cases. And I think when I contrast that with what I see a lot in the abolitionist movement is there seems to be kind of a skewed emphasis on women as opposed to men. And I know that that's meant to kind of counterbalance what we see, that, the victim narrative of the pro-life movement. But it almost seems to be like a 100% like exclusive focus on going after the women, when in my opinion, the men are most to blame here.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Yeah, do you mind if we'll hop in here and then we can do a lot more back and forth as we go?
Yeah, I think that sums it up. We can get into incrementalism later, I think.
So before you state our thing, just the thing that dawns on me while you're talking, and I just got to sit here and not interrupt, let you get your stuff out.
You probably had so many things.
Well, no, I mean, I do a lot of like street engagement. So like the person saying their thing and then you can, it's back and forth.
Yeah.
So in order to show mercy to a mother who aborts her child and not punish her and give her like the death penalty, you have to have a law that says aborting your child is a crime. It's a capital crime. And so if you establish a law in your culture saying abortion is murder, we don't just say it's murder, it actually is murder. Anyone who performs the act of abortion, defined as the intentional destruction of a preborn human being, whether they're male or female, whether they're doing it by knocking a woman out and forcing abortion drugs on her, or whether they're doing it, whether the woman is ordering the pill, anyone who performs the act of abortion is committing a crime. So we're not talking about whether or not women should be punished. We're talking about whether or not there should be a law to establish justice and mercy. And the only way you can give mercy to Paul or David, the prostitute, or the mother who's having an abortion, or the man who forced her to have an abortion, is if there's a law saying if you do this, you're going to be punished. And in our judicial system, of course, you can, if there's a law against murder for the preborn, you can have that woman go through the legal process, and out of this, all the stuff you're thinking about male headship and all the stuff about like the inner, like what we know about her struggles, you can hear the whole case, and a jury of her peers and a judge can actually lessen the punishment.
Yeah,
but you can't do that. You can't show mercy without law. So our position is Micah 6:8. And it's not a quandary, do justice and love mercy. It actually makes sense. The only way you can actually show mercy to someone is if you say you broke this law, it's punishable by death, or you broke this law, it's incarceration for life. But hearing your story, seeing the coercion, seeing the song, we're showing you mercy. So I don't know how you can actually show mercy if your main thing is making sure that no law.
Yeah. So the key there, and I think you said it right in your explanation, Joel. I think you talked about there's a biblical case for judicially showing mercy. And with that, I would totally agree. Like I think as a juror, I think a juror has the prerogative, based on the facts of any given case, to show mercy. But what we're talking about in this discussion is not, whether in a particular case a particular juror or the whole jury should in fact do that. The discussion is, what should the law be? Like, what should the lawmakers write? And I think, to Russell's point, if legislatively you're saying that there is no penalty attached, there's no punishment attached to the act of a mother murdering her preborn child, yeah, there's actually no mercy to show, because it's basically being treated as a right. You're saying that a mother can do this without having anything happen. But I think we kind of jumped the gun a bit there. So let me go back real quick, define our position, and then maybe Russell can do a bit more response, and then we'll just get right into the back and forth here. But for those who don't know, who haven't because our channel has blown up relatively recently, so I think we have a lot of new followers who maybe haven't watched a lot of our old stuff. But our position on this subject is that abortion is murder and should be treated as such in the laws of each particular state and in the laws of the nation. And so we would say that there is no class of people, whether it be men, whether it be women, or people of a certain ethnicity, or what have you, who should have the right to kill any other group of human beings. And so on the question of should the mothers be prosecuted for the killing of her preborn child, our answer would be, well, yes. Is it murder? Yes. Okay. Well, then it should be treated as such. Now, that does not mean that we're saying every mother is culpable to the same degree. So we would say that the facts of each case should always come into play. So, like you brought up coercion, duress. If there were facts involved in the case that meet the legal definition of coercion or duress, then absolutely we would say that woman is a victim. She was a victim of that coercion of her sex trafficker or whoever it was, her boyfriend or husband who is coercing her to do that. She is a victim. But in the overwhelming majority where that is not one of the facts of the case, that a mother is knowingly, willingly taking her child to the slaughter, either taking a pill to starve them or going to a clinic to have them torn apart limb by limb, in those cases where there is knowledge of what's being done and she's doing it willingly, that yes, there should be prosecution for murder. And the facts of the case may make it second degree or third degree or first degree or capital or what have you, but legislatively it has to be murder. And then the facts of each case might increase or decrease what that penalty might be. So Russell, is there anything else you wanted to address? And then we can go to the back and forth.
It kind of dips back into the sort of quibble with the word abolitionist. The thing is that right now there's a legal right to abort children, and it is given to mothers everywhere in the United States of America. They have immunity from abortion. There's no prosecution. So there are laws and rulings and cultural ideals. There's a whole bunch in place that basically says this is something you can do and you will never face any consequences of it, legally speaking.
Yeah,
and so we call ourselves abolitionists because it's a practice that's being carried out and protected by law. And so you want to abolish, you want to change those laws, and you want to make the laws just across the board. So I think to be able to have like a right, proper, what's the difference between a pro-lifer and an abolitionist? It's good that we're talking about the second victim narrative and punishing women and stuff, but really, if you could just boil it down, it's like, should there be a law that says abortion is murder? Whoever is the principal cause of the abortion is the person who needs to be tried in violating that law. And whatever laws protect a person, whether they're male, female, a doctor, a person with a coat hanger, whatever, across the board, they need to be brought up and tried in accordance with that just law. So I forgot what you said. Your general position is the phrase you had, but it was like whether or not you want abortion to be gone. I think we all agree that we want abortion not to happen. But our position is we do want to establish justice, establish mercy, have those things set in stone without changing a jot or tittle of that law, and then say, we are going to uphold this set of statutes, and then we're going to treat everyone fairly as we can as fallen human beings. And I think that you can't even, like I said a second ago, you can't even show mercy without justice. And so you can't punish the man who's coercing the woman to get an abortion unless you're saying abortion, the act, is murder. Like if a man slips abortion pills into his girlfriend who's expecting because he wants her to have a miscarriage, and so he roofies her and then he gives her abortion pills. If there's a law in the book saying that is murder, you can hold that man accountable because he's the principal cause of that abortion. But say a girl is pregnant, the boy doesn't even know, and she goes and orders abortion pills, gets them to her house, and then takes them, and she's the only person outside of God who knows that she murdered a baby. She's the principal cause. She's the abortionist. And so you have to have a law that says abortion is murder, it should be treated like murder, and abortionists should be the ones facing the penalty. And the issue is in our modern world, who is the abortionist? You have to be able to put it on trial. Who aborted this baby? Who was the one who made the choice? And so we all agree abortion's bad, but there's that other side that's not in this debate. They're the pro-choicers. They believe that we should have the right to choose to abort our babies. That's like they're saying we have the forethought to choose to eliminate children. And if you go out to abortion clinics or colleges or arts festivals, music festivals, you run into a vast majority of them that are just saying, yes, I want to do this. I chose to do this. I went about and did it. And they all think that what they're doing is okay. And so the last little point that I think is really important about what abolitionists are trying to do is we live in a culture where for the past 50 years, whether you're talking about the right or the left, conservative Christians, liberal progressives, George Soros people, everyone in power who's meant to establish justice has been telling women, men, old, young, black, white, everyone in between, you're not going to get in trouble if you do this. And so we've instructed the culture heavily that abortion is not murder. And so abolitionists want to start saying, no, abortion is murder, and the culture needs to hear about it so that we can show mercy in preaching the gospel, show mercy to the preborn, so that we can begin to get our culture right because our culture is wrong. So there's a lot there, but establishing justice is the point. The point isn't going after women. There's a sort of sense where I think you may be able to explain it better. There's a point where it looks like we're going after the women the most. It's because the pro-lifers are writing into their resolutions and into their laws, into their bills, and into all their rhetoric that there should be immunity for mothers who murder their children. And at the same time, we know that the vast majority of abortions that are happening in our culture are happening because of the sole decision of mothers who want to eliminate their children, terminate their pregnancy.
And so just to demonstrate Russell's point real quick, and then I'll kick it back to you, Joel, and we'll probably get into some more brief back and forth after that. But Russell talked about how the principal actor in so many abortions nowadays is the mother, and because of the pill. And so I actually went online to just kind of see how easy it was for myself. And so I went onto one of these websites, and I won't give airtime to the name of the URL, but I went onto one of these websites and I sent them a sob story. I'm a college student. I need help. If I don't get this abortion, my life's going to be ruined and my career's going to be ruined. And I got this about 3-4 days later. I get this to my house again in Norman, Oklahoma. And the return address on this is Austin, Texas, right? Those are two states where supposedly abortion has been outlawed, right?
And they were free.
I didn't have to pay. I didn't have a single dime for this. It would have been if I had been pregnant, a pregnant woman, of course, it would have been easier for me to take these pills than it has been for basically anyone ever in the history of the world to get an abortion here in Post Row, Oklahoma. And so if we're going to say that the woman should not be prosecuted for the abortion, this just is the natural consequence. And you can say, well, maybe let's try to shut down, the URL. Well, then another URL pops up, or then there's going to be some distributor that gets, hundreds or thousands of these into the state and they get distributed. It's like, if there's always a way around it. If you say that there's no penalty for doing it, then essentially what you're saying is that the mother can do it. And if she can do it with kind of just the depravity of humanity, and particularly, American society in the year 2023, this is just going to happen.
And she could actually get that, open it up, pull the pills out, and take them on live television or on the steps of the Supreme Court.
Yep.
And pro-life laws would protect her. So it's so if you change the law and you establish justice, you might not be able to stop the pill, right? Because people do illegal things, break the law. But like, you couldn't open that package and take that pill in front of a sheriff.
Right. So let me ask this, and this might get more into the incrementalism discussion too, but why not just, why not just go after the abortionists first and then the pill distributors first, get all those taken care of, and then if women are still finding ways to do this, then addressing it from there.
Well, do you think so? So say someone has a gun and they go to a school and they shoot up people. Do you think we should go after Smith & Wesson first?
No, I don't think that's a good parallel to it. I think. I'm just talking about going after the provider. Right. Well, first of all,
the person is using
when it
taking
comes
the pill.
to
That's the act. It's not the pill. It's the act of taking the pill. Pills don't take themselves.
Yeah. Well, I think so a couple things. In my opinion, the primary agent with the most knowledge of what they're doing, in the vast majority of these cases, is the abortionists. They know what they're doing. They know that they're taking a human life. They're doing it callously, and it's extremely evil.
Are you referring to the mother who takes the pill as the abortionist?
I'm talking about the abortionists, the people who provide abortions, surgical abortions, or the people who provide these pills and these drugs, like the RU486 and all that. I think that it is. I think right now it's very hard to make a case, and you said it yourself earlier that a lot of these people, the vast majority of these women, actually think it's okay. It's very easy to take a pill. You never see the baby, you never hold the baby. We have 50 years of this brainwashing that women have been experiencing that has told them one thing, that it's just a clump of cells, that it's nothing, it's not a life.
We're trying to change that.
So we know that this is true. We know that so many women are doing this in ignorance because we have the statistics that if women see their baby in an ultrasound, the majority of them change their mind once they see that baby. And so there's a lot of ignorance, and I think it's very hard to make a case that someone is operating in malice with a forethought, with full knowledge of what they're doing when it comes to abortion right now. Now, in 50 to 100 years, maybe after we've established a culture of life and abortion has been, illegal for a while, maybe it's easier to make a case that it's widely known as being wrong. But I think the thing that gives me pause with all this is that we're talking about prosecuting someone based off of our judgment of their inner thoughts. Oftentimes there are no other witnesses. This is a girl who ordered something very easily online, took the pill, and it was done. And we are asking a judge, a jury, a prosecutor to make a judgment of whether or not this woman in her inner thoughts had full knowledge of what she was doing and the ramifications of what she was doing. And I think that's something that our judicial system is not equipped to do yet.
Real quickly, I think that that's what the judicial system and judges and juries do, I would say, in every single case, right? That's their job is did this person know what they were doing? I think that is categorically a question for the judiciary. That is categorically not a question for the person who's making a law. The person making a law just needs to think about what is just. Like, is abortion murder? Yes. Okay, then I'm going to write a law saying the act of abortion is murder and shall be treated as such. That was a very paraphrased version, but the legalese version of that is for the legislature. The court's the only reason it exists is to sort through the facts of exactly what you described. Did this person know what they were doing? Was this person coerced? Those are considerations.
Were they insane?
Were they acting in self-defense, under duress? That's present in every single case. That's the whole point of the judiciary.
And again, you can do that in the judiciary because you have a law against murder. So like somebody somewhere who murders somebody, and they did it because they were really, really poor, and the person they murdered was their boss who fired them on Christmas Eve or whatever, and they have this whole thing, and they were out of their minds, they're out of sorts, they were high or they were drunk, and they went and they murdered their boss. Well, thank goodness there's a law saying you're not allowed to murder your boss. Now, given that there's a law saying you're not allowed to murder your boss, let's look at this guy's story. Let's look at what's going on. We can hear his inner stuff, and we can weigh that, and we can make that part of our consideration. But we can only even do what you're talking about if there's a law. I know that's like my first point, but like you can't, like basically everything you're saying can be applied to anyone who's murdering anyone.
Yeah, and
born or unborn.
Well, one other response as well. I think this really is part of the crux of it, because I think in your moral argument, if it were true that there really were, or that there was a grave lack of knowledge of when life begins, if that were present on a very broad scale, as I would say, maybe you could argue that, maybe thousands of years ago, there would have been very little embryological knowledge. But you brought up when someone sees an ultrasound, they're a lot less likely to get the abortion, which, I mean, if that's true, I think the ultrasound, their particular ultrasound, is kind of helping to develop an emotional connection. Anyone who's had a baby knows that when you see that, it feels more real for the first time, and all that sort of stuff. It's great to hear your baby's heartbeat, and that makes it feel real. But everyone has seen an ultrasound, right? Like everyone in our culture, you can't live unless you're under a rock out in the mountains. You can't not see an ultrasound. You can't avoid sixth grade biology when they say sperm, egg, new human being. It's like the basic knowledge is there, and that is actually being reflected in pro-choice articles and podcasts and all these things, where we no longer see the clump of cells argument. What we see is, I think that the most kind of on the nose example I can think of was Mary Elizabeth Williams writing in Salon, and she wrote the title of the article. You can look it up. So what if abortion ends a life, right? And so, in the pro-choice argumentation, that is the argumentation. They have conceded this is a life. We are killing this life. We don't care. We want, sexual liberation and liberation to pursue our career completely unencumbered by family and children and all these things. And so, and you see it, I think you'll probably see, maybe different examples if we go anecdotally. But certainly you could see a lot, and there are online, and we had a podcast. We had a podcast titled "Abortion's Murder," and everybody knows it, where we just played clip after clip after clip after clip of these women walking in saying things like, "I know I'm committing murder. That's exactly what do you think I'm here for? I'm here to murder my baby." And they're just example after example.
F them babies.
F them babies.
Like one of
F them
I've
kids.
been there. I was a sidewalk counselor myself, so I've seen it all.
But I think, it's not just there's the anecdotal stuff, but I think we can also just affirm that women just aren't, as a class of people, as dumb as as the pro-life movement seems to think that they are. Like, it's just not, it's not true that like 3,000 abortions are happening every day because people don't know what they're doing. I think it's way more true that 3,000 abortions are happening a day because people are sinners and they're getting away with murder. And since the laws against murder have not been established and carried out immediately, the hearts of the children of men run to do evil. And so our culture is the way it is. And the pro-choice movement, who's shouting their abortions and saying the F them babies and going out and doing all this kind of stuff, like, if I were a pro-choicer, I'd be deeply offended. It's like, yeah, we know what we're doing. We're not idiots. We don't even the stat about abortion ultrasound. Pro-lifers say that to each other at their fundraisers and stuff. But the only people who choose life after seeing an abortion, after seeing an ultrasound, are women that have gone to CPCs to look at ultrasounds, and the stat comes from something like that. I think that actually women and men in our culture, want to do something and they don't want to see the ultrasound. I don't want to see the ultrasound. Or
Right. Well,
what if they did look at the ultrasound and then they said, oh my gosh, that's a little wiggly giggly baby. Still getting an abortion. If you had your way, that person who looks at an ultrasound and says, oh yeah, I can see that looks just like I looked whenever I was 9 weeks old, I'm still getting the abortion because of this reason, this reason, this reason, this reason. That person in that instance has blanket immunity because we're arguing from this fictional lot of women who have no idea what they're doing and wouldn't do it if they just saw an ultrasound. Well, the woman who sees the ultrasound.
I don't think that's fictional. I think that's very real. I think that's a reality that, and I don't want to debate
reality?
the fine points of that, because I think it's, we're talking about, right now we're going back and forth on how much do these women know about what they're doing?
Yeah.
How culpable are they? And that's something that's I think a worthy discussion to have.
We could get in the weeds on it, but yeah.
And you can get in the weeds with it, but I think it's.
But the woman, but say the woman who does.
I think it's nearly impossible right now to work that out in a court system. This discussion that we're having, how much do they know about what they were? I mean, like you said, there are some cases that are blatantly obvious, but even in those cases. So I've seen like the Shout Your Abortion campaign. You see some of the testimonies of these girls who are recording a Shout Your Abortion video.
Oh yeah,
they're almost crying through it.
Yeah.
They're like pasting on a smile. You can see the absolute anguish that some of these women are in.
They need the gospel, right? They need to hear the justice. You've done this evil thing, and there's mercy.
They feel the loss and the guilt. I think here's the other thing, kind of going back to like, you can't show mercy without the law. I think the law already exists. It's written on all our hearts. We see it in the faces of these women who are holding back tears while they're shouting their abortion. And they, like you said, I think at some level there's a deep down
so they do know.
Understanding of the moral law and what they did.
Okay, so they do know.
So I think that's fair to say on some level, and that's also why I think that you don't necessarily need the law to show mercy to someone. If someone knows what they did deep down and they feel that anguish and guilt, showing them mercy doesn't necessarily require a law on the books, because they know that what they did was wrong.
So how about I pitch this to you real quick, just on that point, because I would agree that women who have abortions, that there is serious emotional scarring that comes from. I would affirm that completely. And so I look at something like that, and I look at something like, I know there's lots of people, we've done it. Laura Klassen has kind of done this experiment, which is, it's not like a exactly airtight, sociological experiment, but just generally speaking, for people who've had abortions, had it been homicide and had you been looking down, the barrel of basically first-degree murder charges, would you have gone through with that abortion? And just testament, like, I think it's almost unanimous on every post we've ever done, on the one that Laura did. And then whenever I see this, it's no, of course not. Yeah. I wouldn't have risked being executed, or I wouldn't have risked going to jail for the rest of my life for this.
Hundreds. It was like hundreds. The only person who said, no, I still would have done it, is someone who like speaks at pro-life events. And
that was Abby Johnson, who actually now is switched and taken our side, at least not on abolitionism as a whole, but on this question. Yeah. But yeah, I think like we used to have a post-abortive mother's, Sonia Ganella, who used to run our store, and we did a podcast with her, and just telling her story. And it's like, no, I mean, of course not. Like I would do anything for it to have been murder at the time that I did this, that I may have been spared from this guilt, that my child, most of all, would have been spared from this fate that they suffered at my hands.
Yeah.
And so I look at having mercy on these women and the men too, right? I mean, especially for men who didn't want their wives or girlfriends to do it. Like, let's use the law as it's supposed to be used, right? The law has three uses. Well, one of them is as a tutor, as to guide people away from soul-destroying depravity like child sacrifice. And so I want to use the law, one, to establish justice for the child, but two, as a deterrent so that people, that young mothers and fathers considering abortion or even considering having sex before they're ready to have a kid. I mean, I think that would be another consequence of abolishing abortion is you'd have a lot less promiscuity because you don't have the safety net of abortion anymore. But for those mothers who have done this and the fathers who have done this and they're looking at this tough decision, this really close call, I don't know quite what to do. Well, if you add homicide charges to one side of that scale and that decision-making process, all of a sudden, it's not a close decision anymore. And so I want to save people from making this choice in the first place.
Yeah, I'm picturing a nightmare scenario where, like I what you said earlier about how it could help to curb some of this hookup culture that we're seeing, this, this sex outside, women being used in this way by men. I'm picturing a nightmare scenario where a girl gets an abortion and both the man and the abortionist point the finger at the woman. And I mean, it could be done. Imagine a scenario in court where you have the man saying, no, she wanted it, and the woman saying, no, he pressured me to do it. And it's one word, it's one person's word against another.
That's what juries and judges are for.
I mean, juries and judges we live, our judicial system is increasingly. Well, I won't get into that.
I'm saying you still got to have a law for that.
And one very important thing, you got to have a law, but a very important thing there is, again, the same standard would apply. It's innocent till proven guilty. So if all that you have is, his word, her word, if there's any doubt, right? If there's any, if there's any reasonable doubt whatsoever, she's not going to be charged with anything. Because to be found of guilt, to be convicted in our judicial system, you have to be guilty beyond reasonable doubt when it comes to crimes like homicide.
And I think outside of prosecution on it, just because you were making the point and I didn't want it to get lost, that like, if it is true that we live in a culture where you've got like millions and millions of women who just don't really know that abortion's murder, and you want to change that, well, what about the legislators passing a law saying this is murder?
The law's a tutor.
And so that law's a tutor thing, I don't think it'll take 50 years, but like I think if for the next 50 years the pro-lifers have their way and they keep on saying, you're not guilty, you're not guilty, you'll never be punished, this isn't bad. You know who really is? Play the victim.
That's one thing, a problem I have with the abolitionist side is that no one's saying that you did nothing wrong, you're not guilty.
Well, if you do it, you won't be punished. You can say it was the abortionist.
Yeah. So, okay. So let me float this out here. This is just kind of a hypothetical here, maybe a compromise. I don't know. If the important thing to you guys, in your opinion, is having a law that states this is murder, why not have a law that states it's murder with a specific category for abortion that has a light touch in terms of what punishments can be meted out? I mean like a very light touch, like a small fine.
Well, that just tells people this isn't murder. It's a small fine thing.
What's that?
That just instructs the culture, this isn't murder, this is a small fine thing.
I don't think so.
Well, like what kind of fine?
Like I don't know. I'm saying I think for the safety of the woman and the state that she's in, I mean, pregnancy and abortion is a very unique thing. I think it's a fallacy to draw perfect parallels between other types of murder and other types of killing. I mean, the woman is uniquely in a very vulnerable and also dangerous position. I mean, like in some cases, we're talking about pregnancies that are at a risk to the mother. I mean, some women die in childbirth, some women died during pregnancy. Yeah. I think it's worth considering, making abortion as a unique category of murder under our laws.
That's what it is.
Right now. In order to bake in some special protections and provisions for the vulnerability of that woman, so that we don't have these horrific scenarios where, a woman who gets a miscarriage or doesn't know what she was doing is falsely accused and is executed in the state of, in a red state where they're generous with the death penalty. Why not have a law stating this is murder, with a special provision carved out for abortion murder.
Well, if you want to
Not
keep
saying
abortion
that-
around, you do that, and I think that's what we've been doing for the last 50 years. Like if you
I
look for
don't
the laws, if you look for the laws allowing abortion, like in the state of Oklahoma, they're in the murder statute. Like this is a form of murder that you're not going to be charged for. Like where is the law specifically written about like what you have to do before you get an abortion, what kind of ultrasounds, what kind of conversations you have to have, where you can have it, who's allowed to perform it. All of that stuff is written in the law, like for what you're saying, because we're trying to make a special case. And so that's what's led to 75 million babies being murdered. And so we're trying to change that.
Yeah, and I think
we need more of that.
It brings it back to the law. The law is a tutor point, right? And so, you talked about maybe 50 years down the road, and I would say if at any point, if we want to get there in 10 years, 50 years, however long, I think you have to be saying the true thing, educating people toward the true thing all along the way.
Yeah, you can't tell them one thing and then switch it.
And so if we're tutoring people that, if you murder a preborn child, there will be evil. Let's say it's a very large number. Let's say it's a $3 million penalty, like something that, no one without insurance is ever going to dream of being able to pay. You're tutoring people that a child's life is worth that much money. You're not tutoring them that this is an image bearer, right? And that this...
Murder them and declare bankruptcy.
Yeah, so... I think we need to be tutoring the true thing in our argumentation, in the culture, in the schools, in the legislature, and that all needs to match.
Yeah. No, I think that goes back to the fallacy I was stating earlier that, different levels of punishment do not mean that one life is worth more or less than another.
But if it's categorically...
The different levels of punishment are the punishment is meant to fit the crime. And so I don't think it's when we provide a light sentence to a mother who gets an abortion, that's not necessarily saying that life was worth less or worth a certain amount of money.
I've heard some pro-lifers say there shouldn't be any kind of sentence. The sentence of her pain and sorrow from it happening is enough. So there's that kind of a graduated scale here. Yeah. There's like a consequence of some kind. We're just saying, like, when it comes to what should the law be, should the law be just? Should the laws against murder be applied equally to all human beings, to all image bearers, whether you want to put the theological language in there or not? Anyone who's made in the image of God, should there be a law against murder? And when you write laws, you don't sort of, like I talk to lots of college students, and they're always arguing from these extreme nightmare situations, like these, like, what about this? What about this? What about
rape,
this?
incest, all that.
It's like, well, it's like that, but it's also kind of like the thing that you're doing, like sort of there's this possibility that if we pass this law, somebody somewhere is going to get in trouble for having a miscarriage. Okay, that's like arguing from that kind of extreme about a conversation about what should the law be. Is something you have to address.
That's happening in Ohio right now. There's
I know pro-choicers
there's a woman who had a miscarriage in the toilet, and she's getting prosecuted for abusing a corpse because she tried to flush it down the toilet.
Right. Right. Because there's probably a law.
So it happens.
There's probably a law saying you're not allowed to abuse corpses. But the thing is, though, if you're going to argue from these things that could happen, you can just make up a scenario like, say there's a woman, she's just had a child, she's got severe postpartum depression. She's at home. Her husband works, 2 or 3 jobs. He's always gone. She's at home with this baby. She's suffering from all this postpartum. Her baby won't sleep. She's having all sorts of problems, and she's just sick and fed up, and she hasn't slept. And what she decides to do is drown the baby in the bathtub. Right. The reason, and then there's an investigation, and it turns out after some time and some looking that she murdered her baby, and then she's put up on. It's the reason that you can even do that investigation and look into it is because there's laws against drowning your babies in the bathtub, and so that kind of. Arguing from the extreme and talking about this sort of thing, you got to be able to bring in, okay, so we're trying to establish a just equal treatment across the board. Is everything that you're saying that would make it a lighter sentence for mothers who take abortion pills also apply to mothers who murder their infants because of their inner life, their situation? Because there's people who murder their infants out of coercion. A boyfriend who's like,
No,
I'm
no.
leaving you because I can't stand this crying baby.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. I would argue, I guess, that that abortion is still a unique situation.
Because
and
the baby's
due to-
inside?
Because of our cultural beliefs and attitudes and what people think about it.
Well, we're
right
trying
now.
to change those by establishing just
So
laws.
the question is
Okay, so
how to
let
change
me
them.
so let me delve into that. I mentioned this on Twitter. I used this illustration on Twitter. You probably saw it, James.
Yep.
This idea of, imagine you're in Brazil, and murder is illegal in Brazil. You're exploring the Amazon rainforest, and you come upon an uncontacted Stone Age tribe that practices cannibalism. What is your approach to those people who are killing and eating each other? One of the most heinous, horrific crimes you can think of, right? You don't speak their language. They've never been. They're still 2,000 years behind, everyone else. My contention is, okay, maybe you go in, and murder's already illegal. We already have a law, but you're not day one of contacting that tribe. You're not erecting a scaffold in the middle of the village with a noose on it and hanging people for their crimes of cannibalism. You're first of all trying to figure out their language and reaching out to them. You're then educating them, introducing them to new concepts, and eventually getting them to a point where you can righteously judge these people for what they're doing.
Right.
I think that, again, it's not a perfect parallel, but I think that there's
it's good. It's a good thought experiment.
Yeah, I agree.
I think that
yeah, so I think how I would respond to the thought experiment. I think if you're coming into a tribe and you're one missionary or two or three missionaries, you're not going to come in with the ability to write laws and enforce laws in this culture that doesn't know who you are. But I think what I would do as a missionary or someone trying to influence these people, and
not even a missionary. Say you're a government official.
Say you're a government official. Okay.
Someone who's exploring the Amazon rainforest on behalf of the government to try to reach this tribe.
Sure.
And maybe you do have the authority to enforce laws. Maybe you're law enforcement. Let's steel man it a little bit.
Okay, so steel man it. So you're law enforcement. So if I have the ability legally, I guess I don't know the intricacies of international law as well as I do kind of Oklahoma or U.S. law, but I think I begin certainly by making a cultural argument appeal to these people, and that culture appeal will never ever back away from the truth for either calculated pragmatic reasons or whatever. Will always be murder is worthy of death. Like, here is the penalty if you do this.
You can't contradict your cultural argument with your laws. Hey, you cannibals, eating people's bad, but we're here to set up a special. Because what you're actually advocating to make the steel man steal is you're advocating that we should, in a culture that is full of cannibals, set up a special permissions for cannibalism and allow the cannibals to continue to be cannibals for
until some unknown period,
for decades and decades and decades, and then establish that law. And so we're saying
no. I would say the law's pre-existing. Murder's already wrong.
When you say the law, are you talking about the moral law of God on the heart, or what law are you talking about?
No, I'm saying that the actual law is, say, in Brazil. It's on the books. Murder's wrong. So these people are technically within the borders of Brazil. They're breaking the law.
I see. Oh, then yes, I would say
you'd enforce it.
Yeah, if they're under the jurisdiction of Brazil, absolutely, I would enforce it. And I think that by not
you would go in day one and start hanging.
No,
the natives.
you'd go in. You would say, "Here's the law. Here's the law that you're breaking it. Here's how you're breaking it, and here's how we're going to enforce that." So you establish justice and you enact just statutes and you carry out trials without showing partiality. So the situation. They're a bunch of cannibals, and you're trying to get them to no longer eat other people. I'm assuming you kill someone and then you eat them. They're not just eating people who die of old age, I guess. I don't know. But like that, the question is, if you really do set it up, like you can say this, you're the king of this culture. Like, why would you say, oh, culture, you're so bad, I want to leave you in your badness?
No, I think that you would do everything that you can using the law enforcement means, the weapons at your disposal to prevent this from happening. Whether,
But then if it happens, so you're saying
But
that
then if it happens, what do?
You are the police of Brazil. You see a guy murder another guy and then eat him. You're saying you would not.
You failed to prevent it.
You weren't able, for whatever reason, you weren't able to stop it. You were too late on the scene.
But you thought about other people.
You would not arrest that guy you just saw kill and eat someone?
Well, see, that's the thing. Like it is.
Because it tells the other cannibals not to do it.
That's where it gets murky as to whether or not there's a timeline of teaching these people, learning their language and teaching them that it's wrong and why it's wrong. Like, again, maybe it's a shorter timeline than 50 years, like I was saying earlier. Maybe it's a week or two. But my only point is you're not meting out justice and executing people on day one.
But do you establish the law of
learning?
Do you establish the law?
There.
It's already there. Do you say, hey, guys, do you tell them,
here's the law and we are going to enforce this, so stop flipping, killing, and eating each other?
Or do you tell them, here's the law, you're breaking it, we understand that you're breaking it, and you're going to continue to break it, so we're not really going to enforce it?
Why would they stop if they know you're not going to enforce it, And then that's what the law is.
Why would they take you seriously? It's like you're contradicting your moral cultural argument. Hey, we want to change you into a non-cannibalistic culture, but we're not willing. We don't want to put on our man pants and tell you don't do it.
No,
we're going to protect people from being cannibalized, but we're not going, because one of the best ways you protect like Christians from being murdered when they go preach the gospel is anyone who does that to any Christian anywhere in the United States of America or wherever gets punished. Now, if somebody kills a street preacher somewhere and then they look and they're like, wow, the guy who killed that street preacher didn't get in trouble. They want to protect street preachers from being killed, but like whenever they find that one is killed, or anyone, it doesn't have to be street preachers, but you don't come around, like it's like the cannibal kills a person and eats them and you come in on them and they knew the law, they knew they were breaking it, and they're like, yeah, I did it because I like the taste of
if they
human ribeye.
If they knew the law and they knew they were breaking it, then absolutely. I think my only point in saying this is that I think that there's a strong case to be made that it is very hard to prove in most cases that women fully know what they're doing. Similar to a Stone Age cannibal tribe that practices,
but we need to tell them.
Other people.
Like we're advocating,
but we need to tell them, and we do. We tell them that it's murder. We tell them that it's wrong. We outlaw it. We put the abortionists in jail. We jail the RU-486 people that dispense the drugs.
But we tell them if you get any of these stockpiled pills and you take them, you're not in trouble. We tell them that. Like we write that into our House resolutions and into our laws. Blanket immunity, because we're trying to look really compassionate, and we want to tell you that we disagree with those abolitionists who are trying to punish you, because that's what happens right now. The pro-lifers are telling the culture, we disagree with the abolitionists who believe that this should be treated as though you're murdering a toddler.
And one other point I think is important to bring up, I think in an earlier, in actually two earlier parts of the discussion, in the cannibals thought experiment, you talked about the law of God is written on the heart. And so like there's going to be somewhere like the cannibals, they may be ignorant because they're so off the grid and not connected to the rest of society for so long. But again, that moral law is there. And Romans 1 tells us that mankind in our depravity is very, very susceptible to suppressing that in unrighteousness, in sin. I like to murder and eat, or I like my ability to pursue my college career or my job without the hindrance of children. And so I'm going to suppress the truth that I know deep down. I'm going to suppress that because I want to pursue my own lusts and my own success and all of these things. And so that's one point. And then the other point I want to bring up is, we talked about the impact that abortion has on mothers who've done this and fathers too. And so, given that fact that there is so much pain that comes afterwards, right? It's because they know that pain wouldn't be there unless they knew, right? And so I think they know. I think again, the law's on their hearts. I think again, we've all graduated sixth grade biology, or 99.99999% graduated sixth grade biology. We've all seen an ultrasound. Like, we know, and we suppress that because we want to sin, because we love our sexual immorality, because we love our ability to pursue life unencumbered. And so I don't really think it's a strong argument that they don't know. Maybe they suppress the truth. Maybe they don't profess to know. But deep down, again, we've talked about the law is on the heart. This truth is, again...
Yeah, it's suppressing the truth and unrighteousness is what's going on. Like, abolitionists, we really do believe that people are out there sinning to the point of practicing child sacrifice. We don't believe we're the first culture in history that hasn't practiced child sacrifice. Like, people are actually killing their babies. They're sacrificing their children just like the ancient Israelites did to Moloch.
And they could see the baby right in front of them, and then they would put the baby into the fire. Literally, the baby they could see, even more real than the way that we see an ultrasound. Now, everyone in our culture has seen an ultrasound, but that capacity for sin, like Russell said,
we're capable of it,
has always been there in our culture. We may be more advanced in some ways, but in that regard, we aren't.
And that's when Noah got off the boat and he was like, all right, waters receding, we're going to do this again. We got this grace. God's like, all right, so here's the deal. Stop murdering one another. If you shed the innocent blood of a human being by man, your blood shall be shed. Stop doing it. So he's like, I want you to establish justice. Stop doing this. And that sort of reality of the fact that human beings are sinful, human beings can be stupid, can be uninformed, and can be deceived and misled. All of that reality is what we're taking into consideration and saying, okay, so what do we do? Well, biblically, like if we were going to say like legal, moral, practical, or whatever, like biblically, we know that God like believes in just laws and equal treatment and showing no partiality and all that kind of stuff. Let's do that. Let's establish that. And let's take into consideration that we live in a culture that for the past 5 decades has had this permission to practice child sacrifice in the guise of abortion. And let's not be dumb about it. Let's know that, yes, there may be someone somewhere who really just doesn't know what they're doing. But at the same time, there's somebody who knows full well what they're doing and they're on their 9th one. Or there's someone who's doing it because it's like a satanic ritual. Like they literally are purposely getting pregnant and then having the abortion. So everyone between that person and the person who's just like real mentally challenged and has been raped, everyone in between that is our culture. So what is our law? Our law is thou shalt not murder. Who do we apply it to? Human beings. Like no one's allowed to murder another human being. All these extenuating circumstances are there to be vetted out and tried and considered. But you can't even begin to do that if at the same time you're saying, dear culture, as the lawmakers and governing authorities of your state, we are telling you the abolitionists are wrong. There should be no punishment for a mother who orders abortion pills. And then thousands upon thousands of them do that in Oklahoma and stockpile pills and have the pills at the ready. And they have these entire vast networks of, websites where you can get these pills to where all you have to do is like, I'm pregnant, I live in a pro-life state. How do I get the pills? And you get them 3 days later for free. Like, how do we reverse that? By telling them that it's not wrong? Like, that it's the abortion pill provider that's the problem?
No. See that, and that you keep going back to that somehow we're telling these women that it's not wrong, that's not sin. And you also earlier you mentioned something about how we're saying that these women should not be punished for what they've done. I don't even think pro-lifers are saying that. I
think
what the pro-lifers would. Pro-lifers would say, says. I mean, that word "should" being the key. I think pro-lifers are not saying that women should not be punished or don't deserve some sort of punishment at some level. I think that pro-lifers are saying that because of the uniqueness of what carrying a child is, and the vulnerability of a woman, that we will not, not that we should not, but that we will not mete out any kind of punishment or harm to this woman because of these circumstances.
Just a sidebar on that. Do you think pro-lifers are saying that because they think that that is what's true and best for society and most practically powerful thing to protect babies? Or do you think they're saying that because it's PC and it sounds better? They don't want to look discompassionate towards women.
I can only speak for myself. I don't know how other people would answer that question, but I can say that as far as I'm concerned,
like there's not a concern for how it looks to society.
No, I mean, well, only in the sense of when we're talking about strategy, political strategy of ending abortion. I think there's an argument to be made, from pragmatism, and I'll proudly say that I'm a pragmatist when I know, like, the abolitionist movement hates pragmatism, but
well, I think what we're doing is the most pragmatic, but
well, okay, that's fair, but I think maybe there's an argument that leading with this idea that we're going to put women in jail or execute them is maybe not the best strategy for moving the ball forward, because it's going to freak people out.
That's why we got to lead with the act of abortion.
Whether or not you agree with that, I think that could be an argument, for being concerned about how it looks.
Yeah, people should not strawman the abolitionist position to say that we're only running around wanting to punish women. That's like a way of making us look worse. Instead of saying, oh, these abolitionists, they just want to make the laws against murder apply equally to all people. And they're not going after women. They're going after whoever is the principal agent.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that we're not leading with that. I think the New York Times leads with that. Like the National Right to Life open letter about the abolition bill in Louisiana leads with that. But if you read an abolition bill, there's no mention of a woman. There's no mention of anything. It just makes the homicide laws that exist apply to the preborn child. And our argumentation is along those lines. And then, as we addressed a bit earlier, the dispute specifically about women comes up because that's the particular part that the pro-lifers object to. And so there's the whole debate. But we certainly don't lead with that. We would lead with the laws against murder that exist should apply also in the case of preborn children. But I think we haven't touched much on this yet. And I think I'm glad you brought up kind of the practical, pragmatic aspect of this. Because, again, pragmatically, not much has really changed in Oklahoma. We don't have as accurate of statistics because there's no reporting of the abortions that are taking place now, except for, we did see a report that came out of the Journal of the American Medical Association that showed, I think it was, I think Oklahoma is the 5th fastest growing state for self-managed abortion based on numbers that, again, I'm not going to use the name of the URL not to give them any airtime, but these, since the overturn of Roe in states that have, banned abortion, again, it's so easy. And there's people who are stockpiling these, like they order, like I ordered one, but there's people who are ordering these by the hundreds so that if any friend in their community gets pregnant and needs one, they can give it out. Oh, yeah. Like all of these are already in Oklahoma. So pragmatically, how do you have any impact at all? Because I would contend pragmatically, not a single thing has changed in Oklahoma.
It's just not counting them.
It's just they're just not reported. Mm-hmm. It's like the difference between an Uber and a taxi.
Yeah. Well, I think one way to at least chip away at it would be to outlaw the pill.
Outlaw the pill or outlaw taking the pill? Outlaw guns or outlaw shooting people with guns?
Outlaw possession and dealing and manufacture. Just like we treat drugs.
But does that include the mom herself, or would that exclude the mom herself?
Or what if she's doing it by herbals? There's like various herbal concoctions, like stuff you can buy that would treat foot fungus that you can imbibe and it'll kill a baby. So that person does it with their knowledge. She's the abortionist.
Yeah, I think, here's the thing. I think that is something that we will have to deal with at some point. Once Planned Parenthood is destroyed, once the manufacture of these pills is passed into law, and all other avenues to easily access abortion are taken away, if women are self-medicating or crafting herbal treatments to induce an abortion in themselves, I think that's a bridge that we cross when we come to it. But we're so far away from that right now. And again, I'm speaking pragmatically and practically here. I think it seems to me to be at least just better political strategy to start with the low-hanging fruit. We know the abortionists are villains. We can why haven't we shut that down? Why can't we shut that? I mean, if we're going to do it piecemeal, start with these villainous serial killing abortionists, outlaw the pill, do some of these low hanging fruits, and then maybe down the road, some of these other things become easier to address. But I think that what I see and what seems to be from the outside, whether or not it's intended, is it does seem that there is an outsized or out of order emphasis on the women, which I understand from your perspective is an attempt to balance out the complete immunity that the pro-life movement gives the woman. But I've worked with these folks. I was on the sidewalk with them. The Not a Victim movement. I was a part of all of those Facebook groups, and I would see very kind of nasty and ungracious attempts to paint these women in the most heinous light possible. The abolitionists that I work with on the sidewalk, so it was kind of funny. It was a comical situation where I'd be on one side of the sidewalk and I'm trying to be nice and approachable, and I have gift bags for the dads and moms and stuff like that. And on the other side, you had people with GoPros strapped to their chests and bloody signs, and they're shouting at these women. I forget where I was going with that. I think that there are things that there are indications to me that there really does seem to be, whether intended or not, this strange laser-like focus on going after the women. I see nothing about the men.
Because that's not
sometimes I've seen a few tweets here and there, look at this man who's coercing his girlfriend or whatever.
Yeah.
Going back to kind of what I said earlier at the beginning of the podcast, I really do believe men are the primary agent and hold the greatest responsibility before God, and should have the greatest responsibility before the law for the sin of abortion. I think it's heinous what men have done to women in using and abusing them sexually for their own pleasure, and then sending them to an abortion so that they don't have to take responsibility. It's sick and it's horrific. And if we're just talking strategy here, there are easy villains you can go after that culturally are a lot easier to get done. There's the abortionists, there's the pill manufacturers, there's the men. I think to me it's an easier case to make that we should prosecute these men. Mm-hmm. Enact a law. I mean, if we're doing this piecemeal, enact a law that says if you pay for an abortion or pressure a woman in any way, not just coercion, pressure, or try to convince a woman to get an abortion, you're liable for murder, and we will prosecute. Let's start with the men, and then maybe go to the women. Well, if after we've done all that other stuff,
if you make abortion the act murder, you can do that.
Yeah, I think that the reason we haven't sat here and argued about the men, or we haven't talked about the men or the abortionist, is because we're all on the same. When it comes to the men and the abortionist, and you are completely on the same page.
Well, I don't know. Yeah. I mean, I think the thing is if you could construct a nightmare story so there's a man somewhere, he's kind of daft. He doesn't want to be a dad. He doesn't feel ready. He feels a little lazy. He's got his girlfriend pregnant, and he's not really sure whether human life starts at conception or whatever. He's just kind of confused about it. He's grown up in our culture. But he doesn't want to be a dad. He wants to end the pregnancy, and he orders the pills, and he gets the pills, and he has them, and he's like, "Honey, I have these abortion pills, and I don't think we're ready. I'll have a baby with you later." And just making this kind of a normal guy, and gives her the pills and say, please take these. I got these for free from Texas. And she takes it. Well, the act there, like under a law that an abolitionist put in place, would be like, this is a guy that terminated a human being with malice aforethought. Mm-hmm. And if our culture really is filled with people who don't know what's going on, well, we can tell them. We can tell them in our laws, we can tell them in our arguments, and we can make it consistent across the board. But like that specific type person who does that, it's the man, or say the man slips the abortion pill into her drink without her knowing it. You can go after him. Why? Why is it just to go after him? Well, we would say it is because he, regardless of how coerced he was, his information, his knowledge, he has determined in his mind to terminate this baby. And so there's a law that says you're not allowed to do it. And so the whole you go after women thing comes from pro-lifers. Like we're saying, make a law against the practice of abortion. It's no longer a protected right. It's considered murder, just like murdering someone with a knife. Like that's what that. So we write that. Then pro-lifers come on the scene, and 72 organizations get together. They draft a letter, and over throughout that letter, they say no pro-lifer anywhere believes that any mother should ever be held responsible, and they make it about these mean abolitionists who want to go after women, when actually the mean abolitionists are going after abortion. If you watch the lecture I gave at Ohio State like a month ago, I actually say we're not going after just the women. We're going after the men, the women, like whoever it is. Like I say, whoever it is the in murder law, like whoever is the principal agent, the principal in the murder is the one who's held responsible. It could be a man, it could be a woman, it could be the parent, it could be the grandparent. It's like whoever that person is. And so you establish justice. And then when we say that,
my only contention to that is in like a very simple like blanket law that just treats it as murder and nothing else. I mean, it is a very simple, elegant sounding solution to this all. I
like
understand.
The law against murder already.
Well, but my only contention would be that for all these things that I've kind of stated earlier, that there should be a carve out that specifically protects the women, that doesn't rely on the judicial process or the judgment of a prosecutor or a jury.
It's granting them special murder rights is what we would call that. It's telling the culture, in our laws, we're granting mothers special murder rights to do something that we think is murder, that we understand biologically as murder, that we understand morally as murder, but we're going to write into our laws special murder rights for you, for anyone in this class. We're going to treat women with partiality over men. Men who abort their babies are going to get murder charges, but women who abort their babies are not.
I wouldn't agree with that characterization of it. I would call it mercy, and I don't think mercy is necessarily partiality. The other thing,
you could still show someone mercy in that.
What's that?
You could still establish a law saying this is murder, and then someone who's brought on trial, and you see that there's simple-mindedness or whatever you want to call it,
right? And
you're like, we're not going to give her the chair like we did the girl who had the ninth abortion the other day. Like, well, now I think actually if you establish a law saying this is murder, anyone who does it, whether you're the abortionist, the pill provider, like anyone who is the principal, you establish that the number of people murdering their babies goes really, really, really low.
Because the law is a tutor, the law is a deterrent.
And so you wouldn't have all these people running around confused about what they're doing. They wouldn't be able to get the abortions. People would be fearful of handing out the pills and stockpiling them, all that kind of stuff, because they don't want to get other people in trouble.
So speaking of incrementalism, if there were to be a law that you could pass in Oklahoma, I think Oklahoma is a good proving ground because it's kind of like the most conservative pro-life state. I mean, if you should be able to abolish abortion, you should be able to do it in Oklahoma, right?
Right.
If there was a law on the books that was brought forth by pro-lifers, or maybe an agreement between pro-lifers and abolitionists that you knew could get passed, that that declared murder illegal, and carved out a very light sentence, for the woman to protect her for all those reasons that we've been talking about for an hour and a half. And it was treated as let's do this because this is something that we can do. And it will it's not perfect, but it will, in the meantime, it'll save however many babies, and it'll be a step towards, like you said, the law being a schoolmaster and the law being a tutor. I think that's a fair point that, if we do this incrementally and we take a step towards ingraining in our culture this idea of it being murder, and you knew it could pass, and that was the only thing that you could pass.
Why is it the only thing you can pass?
I'm speaking hypothetically here.
Yeah.
If you had the votes for a bill that carved out special protections for the mother or a light sentence for the mother, and you didn't have the votes for a total abolition bill, would you vote for it?
Yeah. So I think the reason, like, Oklahoma is it's not just a thought experiment, it's a reality experiment. In Oklahoma, we have super majorities in the House and the Senate.
Of pro-life Republicans.
Sheriffs, governor, lieutenant governor, every single person, like the majorities of all the people in power are pro-lifers. And because they're pro-lifers, we don't punish abortion as murder. So pro-lifers have all of the votes and all the power to be able to do whatever they want to do. They can do a bill abolishing abortion, establishing equal justice and protection for all human beings. They can do that. They have the votes to pass that. If pro-lifers do actually believe that abortion is murder, they could do that. They could issue decrees. They could put it in every newspaper and say, here in the state of Oklahoma, we're going to treat abortion as homicide. They can do that. They can pass that.
What's the current law? Is it like a 6-week law in Oklahoma?
It's from conception.
Yeah,
but then you have the carve out for the mother that she can. So it's basically what you described in the hypothetical is the real situation.
That's what we have in Oklahoma. And so so we run around on, like, we go to college campuses a few times a month, and when we go to Oklahoma, it does not seem to me like anyone is deprived of abortion. They're still like doing it. There's no change. Like, people don't run up and say, like, we can't get abortions. There's more like, stop telling me what I can and can't do. They want us to be with the pro-lifers and say, this isn't wrong. Like, you've got special dispensation. The reason I call it special murder rights is because it actually happened on the University of Oklahoma. I'm debating a girl, and she's telling me about it, and she basically explains that mothers need to have this, special thing. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's basically what we got. Just in Oklahoma, you used to be able to go get it at a freestanding child sacrifice center, but now you have to order pills, which I would actually say is the result.
Is it illegal to order the pills, or are the pills illegal in the state?
There's no statute that would. Well, actually, it's interesting in Oklahoma because there actually is a statute from 1910 or whatever. When it actually was a small, like, it was I think a 1 to 3 year sentence for the mother, and that is on the books in Oklahoma. But the Attorney General has said, we're not going to, we're not going to prosecute any woman for abortion.
Yeah, the Attorney General is a pro-lifer.
Yes.
So
in reality, it's completely permitted for the mother herself.
Yeah.
Hence, this is perfectly legal.
And so
Oklahoma.
to get to the reason as why we wouldn't argue for that as a step, because if you say, if you did this, what do you think would happen? I'd say the hearts of the children of men run to do evil. Like, if you have an Attorney General saying, we are not going to punish you for ordering abortion pills, you find that Oklahoma is in the top 5 for ordering abortion pills. And you still run into, like, I've run into women, you can watch them on our channel, that tell me they took abortion pills and they have to walk in and out of the living room where they saw the bloody body of their baby on the floor.
Yeah.
And it's painful for them, but they don't think they've done anything wrong, because even the pro-life legislature and the pro-life governor and all the pro-life sheriffs and all the pro-life people with the sword all basically say, this isn't wrong. And so that's why they continue to do it. I don't think it has the pragmatic effect. Like, you could say something like say you were throwing a fundraiser or something, you were like, look, in Oklahoma, this thing that we did has saved X number of lives, because guess what? 0 abortions were performed in Oklahoma in 2023. Well, you can say that because you're trying to, but it's a lie. It's a lie. We know that people are
because it's all being done on the pill.
It's all being done on the pill. And really, you're kind of actually telling, I've run into some people that just tell me, they know. It's like weird. You're like talking to some random person and they're like, Wichita's only 2.5 hours away. And you're like, why do you know that the nearest abortion clinic is 2.5 hours from Norman? Like, why do you know that? Well, it's because they all know. It's like you just know it. Like, you haven't been told by your governing authorities, this is murder, thou shalt not murder. You've been told, we don't do that here in this way. You can order pills and we won't prosecute you, or you can drive to Wichita. Now, the pills would be free. Wichita is gas money and $500. But like, so we're just telling them again, and it's after Roe v. Wade. It's after like the pro-life movement's achieved their goal. Like here, right after the repeal of Roe v. Wade, what do you get? You're allowed to do whatever. Like pro-lifers always told us the reason they're not supporting a bill of abolition is because they're not allowed to because of Roe v. Wade. And then Roe v. Wade gets repealed. Mm-hmm. And then they declare, we're not going to punish you for abortions. And then in states where they put forward bills of abolition and they get onto the Senate floor, all the pro-life organizations get together and say, do not establish justice and equal protection for preborn babies because no pro-lifer thinks that any mother anywhere should ever be held. And it's any. It's not like just the random ones. It's any. No mother anywhere should ever be like you could put on the abortion pill package, you could put on the back of this, that, this is murder, but you will not be punished for it, and people still take them. And you couldn't.
What do you think? Why do you think they're doing that? Do you think they're doing that because they actually believe it, or do you think that this is a political move because they don't want to? They don't want to freak out the other side and create this talking point that we want to put women in jail or execute them.
It's a combination of both. I think a lot of pro-lifers believe what they're saying.
Yeah, I think there's people in both of those two categories. Yeah.
Some people believe what they're saying because they've been saying it, and they got to believe what they've been saying. And then other people are saying who know that what they're saying is hogwash, but they're just worried about how it'll affect the generals.
And actually, I know some people at some various pro-life organizations who have basically expressed to me as such that when I'm making this point, and they see, okay, I see if we don't do this, there's going to have the appeals, and there'll be just as many abortions anyway. And they say, well, yeah, our organization actually does agree with you in theory, but we can't do that because we're like all the politicians we work with won't talk to us anymore if we hold to your position. So there is a good deal of that. Mm-hmm. But real briefly, I did want to come back to kind of specifically the question you had asked about whether, kind of getting back to the pragmatism incrementalism point would we support that bill? And I want to just a brief story. I used to live in Ohio, actually. I used to live in Columbus, Ohio for about 1.5 years. And I met with a guy named Andrew Brenner. And I don't know if you heard the name Andrew Brenner. He was a state senator from kind of north central Columbus, where I was. And he was one of the most prominent spokesmen for the heartbeat bill. He was in all the news articles with quotes in favor of the heartbeat bill, arguing it on the floor, all this stuff. And I met with his office shortly after becoming an abolitionist. And I brought, Oklahoma SB 13 along. And I said, here's what an abolition bill is. Here's why we need one in Ohio. Here's what I'll do to kind of rally up support in the district and support Senator Brenner if he does this. And the response from his aide was, this is very interesting, but it is Senator Brenner's personal religious conviction that life begins at a heartbeat. And I think
never heard that before.
Like the only place you can learn, again, because the law is a tutor. He didn't learn that from this guy's professing believer, right? You don't learn that from God's word. You don't learn that from science. Everything that we know from theology, philosophy, science, observation would tell us that that's not true. We know life begins at fertilization. But because when you argue on the floor of the Senate with tears in your eyes and passion that we need to protect these babies because life, the first sign of life is the heartbeat, and this is when we need to be protecting babies. Again, the law's a tutor, so you begin to internalize that, and that's the impact of compromising from your foundation for the sake of this is what we can get past right now. When you compromise your foundation, that's how you're tutoring yourself as someone arguing for it. That's how you're tutoring the culture. And so if we were to say, again, back to your specific example of either there would be a carve-out for the mother, which is what we have, or there was a small penalty for the mother, we're tutoring all along the way that this isn't really murder. And so I wouldn't call it even a step in the right direction were we to pass that. I would call it a step in the wrong direction, because you're once again imprinting in people's minds, this is not murder. And so if you're going to get to that end goal in 50 years, however long it actually takes, you've got to be saying the true thing all the way. You've got to be being consistently Christian, consistently true, as harsh, as unpolitically popular, and as much as it may hurt, the chances for Republicans to get a majority or whatever the reason. If you back away from speaking the truth all the way through, you're not even moving in the right direction, in my view.
Yeah, and the Republican situation.
I would
so
disagree that the pro-life movement isn't doing that. I mean, me and everyone else I know in the pro-life movement will say that life begins at conception and that abortion is murder. I don't see.
But then you undercut that in the law,
except for that one, thing that you witnessed in Ohio with the guy having that weird religious belief. Pro-lifers, I think, have been very loud and unmoving about what abortion is and when life begins.
Well, I know, but one of the things that just struck me early on in the whole abolition thing was seeing a picture of a guy who is in Texas to support the 20-week fetal pain law that they had going on there, standing and holding a sign that said life begins at conception. So that encapsulated the pro-life movement for me. Like, this guy believes life begins at conception, yet he's stumping for a law that says we will protect babies only after they feel pain at 20 weeks, when most abortions are happening long before that. But this is such a contradictory thing. And I'm not saying anything's wrong with that guy's motives. He's there. He wants to save babies. He wants to serve God. He's doing the best he can. But his sign is completely contradictory. Life begins at conception, but we will not protect you until 20 weeks. So there's this sort of contradictory thing. But I think for abolitionists, and maybe this kind of argument only holds weight for abolitionists, but when you were putting it forward, you're like, you had the opportunity to pass this law and write into your law this special sort of dispensation for mothers. I immediately, and I was thinking about, I was trying not to interrupt because I have, a problem. Just I want to be sitting in a coffee shop, just going back and forth, speaking over. But I realize we're trying to be consumable by people. But I'm thinking to myself, I would personally, and I believe this is best, but I don't think it holds weight in our world. I personally would not write or support a law that I thought from Scripture God was clear in saying he hated it. I would not want God to be opposed to the law that I wrote. Even if I thought or was shown, like the devil himself came in and said, I've got all these studies that show how many lives you'll save and how pragmatic and how good this is. It's going to curtail it to this number, whatever. The wise people of the world came in and said, you're going to save a lot of lives if you just write into this bill something like the rape exception, or you write into this bill an ageist thing, after a certain point. This is going to save a lot of lives, but I want you, Governor, to sign this bill if and only if it allows immunity for mothers. Abolitionists as a movement are largely comprised of people who are like, oh, I wouldn't do that because God says in Isaiah 10 that woe to those who write iniquitous decrees. If you write, God hates it when you show partiality. And that is technically, it's not showing mercy. You can say, I think that's mercy, but it's technically showing partiality. We want to write a special dispensation into the law telling mothers that they're not going to be held responsible. I think that if you're going to approach this from an abolitionist perspective, which is, I don't think is a shared pro-life perspective, there's what the world thinks, there's what we think, and then there's this other agent, and his name is God, and he is actually active. He is actually someone who's revealed what he believes and what he wants us to do. And he has said clearly, I hate iniquity. I hate partiality. And so if you're sitting down to write that law... That would be a
fundamental disagreement that we would have then. Because I think...
you would do something with God as the opponent, and I would do something with God as the fan.
Okay, so...
Because I don't want God as an opponent to a bill that I'm writing.
I think that God is pleased with every attempt that we can make to save some lives.
Even if it does things he hates. So God says, establish justice for the fatherless. Woe to those who write statutes and iniquitous decrees that make the fatherless prey. So the fatherless child, no child is ever biologically without a father, but the fatherless child in our culture is the child conceived in rape. So God is pleased when
I think
you
if
write,
we can establish justice for some of the fatherless as a step towards getting justice for all of the fatherless.
by specifically writing into the law, this fatherless child, the child conceived in rape, is the one we're going to allow you to abort. I'm saying that I do believe in the reality God.
If that's all you can get done, yes, I would say. So here's the thing.
But God's opposing it.
God, there's God's law, and there's the very messy practicality of how it works out in our judicial system and our justice system.
I'm just saying God's an agent and he can oppose it. So behind the scenes, he's working against your law because he hates it. And you're saying, no, God doesn't hate it. He likes it because the intention is to save some. And I'm saying, no, God doesn't like it when you write into law, these fatherless children might remain prey. I'm saying God.
I think that's a bit of a category error in that I think it's two separate things when we're talking about God's perfect and holy law and how it works out practically speaking. I mean, I think Trump is a great example because Trump and evangelicals supporting Trump evangelicals had to do a lot of soul searching over Trump because, we were faced with a vote between, a guy who's a wicked guy, who's a womanizer, and in a lot of ways not a good guy, and a woman who would have gutted the Supreme Court and cemented Roe versus Wade for another 100 years, and so evangelicals were forced to kind of make this tragic decision between two imperfect people, and support someone who. You could make the case that God stands opposed to this guy, who is not a Christian, who's not saved, who does a lot of things that God hates. You're supporting him and putting him in office so that you can because you want to save some lives. You want to do whatever you can, however little it might be, to save some lives. I think we confuse these things sometimes because, the law of God is holy and it's perfect. As soon as you try to translate that into the human experience, immediately, since we're unholy, fallen creatures, immediately it starts to get messed up. And there's going to be imperfections and we're going to fall short in various ways.
Agreed.
If I'm choosing between saving some babies now, as a step to save more babies later, I'm going to take that choice every time. Yeah. Same thing with, Wilberforce was always frustrated with the incrementalism that he saw. I mean, he talked about how angry and frustrated he was with he wanted slavery gone, abolished, and rightfully so.
He said the incrementalists were the ones who kept it from being abolished for those 20 years that he wrote those bills.
That said, he still, in spite of his frustration, he still supported those bills that, there were incremental bills that we're not going to abolish slavery right now, but we are going to, ban, shipping slaves into Europe.
Hold on, just real quick.
People can keep their slaves, but we're going to ban shipping them into Europe. Okay,
you think Wilberforce supported those
That's
bills?
not a perfect solution, but it's at least preventing the influx and it's chipping away at the problem.
So I know the problem is I'd say I don't want to interrupt, but then.
Yeah, no, that's okay.
I darn near read everything Wilberforce ever wrote. So you got a problem. Like which bill? So what actually happened historically is that Wilberforce put forward a bill to abolish the slave trade, and they voted against it. And he put forward a bill to abolish the slave trade, and they voted against it. And in order to substitute for that, to do something else, to feel like they're doing something, they put forward the Dalban Act. To give more space to the slaves on the ships. And Wilberforce decried it. He wasn't for it. He actually wrote that it was wrong and bad and that it was a stay of the slave system. And they actually, anytime any sort of even grassroots guy abolitionist said, well, at least we've taken a step in the right direction, Wilberforce and Clarkson and the actual leaders of the abolition of the slave trade movement said, no, this is a marplot. This is a substitute. We don't support this. This is what's keeping it from being abolished. So I know pro-lifers say a lot of stuff about Wilberforce, but it's actually factually not true.
There's a couple different things with Wilberforce and a couple different laws. So that example that you cited of providing more space to slaves on the ship, I think that's a good example of what we've seen in what I oppose in regulating abortion is this idea that we're going to let these people clean up their act a little bit. We're going to let abortionists make abortion safer, make their clinics safer, whatever. That is, I think there's a strong case to be made for opposing that because that is allowing it to propagate and allowing it to continue because we're making it.
Yeah. That's what we say.
It up.
That's what we say. All pro-life incremental legislation is like.
That said,
what bill were you saying?
There were other laws that not just in Europe but also in the colonies that chipped away at slavery by banning shipments, by banning the capturing of slaves in certain islands.
Okay,
correct. Yeah.
It didn't ban it altogether, but it saved a few people.
And here is what he said of those bills. He said, "Let me most seriously." This is quoting from a letter on the abolition of the slave trade, his 1807 book.
Which bill specifically was he talking about?
So
all of them here.
all of them. So let me most seriously urge on the conscientious deliberations of those who, by their fatal proposal of gradual instead of immediate abolition, dash the cup of happiness from the lips of the wretched African at the very moment when he at last appeared likely to taste it. Let me be forgiven if I speak strongly where I feel so very deeply. It is not only because the gradualists, the gradual abolitionists, have been in fact the only real stay of that system of wickedness and cruelty which we wish to abolish. Though that assertion is unquestionably true, it is trying beyond expression that they, the incrementalists, the gradual abolitionists, should be the real maintainers of the slave trade. And what he was talking about there was an interaction in, I think it was 1792, between him and an anti-slavery gradualist named Henry Dundas. And Wilberforce, like he came year after year after year after year, came with his abolition bill. And then Henry Dundas, the incrementalist, comes in and says, and I won't read it because it's a long quote, but my honorable friends have known that I long entertained the same opinion with them as to the abolition of the slave trade. I agree with Wilberforce. Wilberforce is great. His heart is so pure. He's great, but it should be done gradually. And then he amends it to become a gradual bill. And that bill, I believe the contents were that the children of slaves would be allowed to go free. And I think the slavery conditions would improve. There'd be higher regulations on.
And eventually the slave trade would come to an end at such and such date.
Right.
And he specified a date.
And so every time he came with his abolition bill, Henry Dundas or another incrementalist would come along and say, no, I agree with you to your end goal, but let's do it gradually. Yeah. And here in Oklahoma, we've seen the exact same thing. We've seen Senator Joseph Silk and then Senator Warren Hamilton saying, hey, here's the bill to completely abolish this. And then Greg Treat, the pro tem of the Senate, the guy who we're kind of mostly attacking most ferociously because he's the main guy opposing us, he says, no, but I'll author this other pro-life bill over here. Look at this. I'm a pro-life hero. And then he gets all the awards and the acclaim from Oklahomans for Life and Tony Lowinger. And so, but because we came with the abolition bill, then they swoop in, no, here's the incremental bill instead. And that's how it plays. That's how it's played out in Texas with Jeff Leach, in Missouri with Bob Onder. That's how it worked with William Wilberforce and Henry Dundas. And that's why he excoriated the incrementalists in this way as fiercely or more fierce than we ever have. Again, he says the real maintainers of the slave trade were the anti-slavery gradualists.
So it's just a point of history that actually, if pro-life incrementalists today want to say, we are following in the footsteps of, it needs to be Henry Dundas or William Dolben. It can't be Wilberforce because Wilberforce was a hardcore anti-incrementalist.
Okay, so a couple things with that.
And this all available on Google Books if you want to read it.
The first being, I think we should consider situations where you're dealing with what can pass a legislative body and what can't pass. Mm-hmm. The other thing is the fact that, slavery and abortion are, while both being grave injustices, there is a difference there. And there is a sense to where the pro-lifers are, you know, I would doubt that pro-lifers are being gradualists for gradualist sake because they just want to slow things down a little bit. I think it's either
they think it's
very
wise.
practical, this is what we can pass right now, or the ideological stance of we should not be going after these mothers, which I think which in my opinion is defensible. I know you guys disagree, but you know, I don't think this is I know that there were a lot of people who opposed William Wilberforce who had a lot of interest in keeping slavery going a little bit longer, and were just trying to slow him down. I don't think that's the case with the pro-life movement here. I think that it's a matter of what can we pass. What is an easy sell right now? You know, like you mentioned, heartbeat and fetal pain. Obviously, those are arbitrary. Obviously, we know life begins at conception, but fetal pain is a very compelling political argument. So, okay, you know, here's something that we can pass right now.
It saves no one, but
and then, you know, the only difference beyond that I see is how severely should these mothers be treated? You know, and I just can't follow you there. I just, you know, I read the gospel. I read how, I mean, there's this union in Jesus of grace and truth. There's this terrible justice and wrath of God, and then there's this abundant mercy. I can't relate to anyone who would not be tripping over themselves to pour out mercy on these women. I just can't. I think, and I think it's a reflex that is good. I think a lot of evangelicals and pro-lifers can't necessarily articulate why they feel that way. I think that we're standing on 2,000 years of chivalry and you know, following the scriptures dictates in terms of male headship and the vulnerability and weaker vessel nature of the woman. You know, I think that there's a good reason that we naturally squirm at the thought of killing a woman as opposed to killing a man, because there is a difference. There is a difference between women and men. And men are meant to protect women. Men have failed to protect women. That has put women in an extremely vulnerable state. Our culture lies to women from every corner. And so women are deceived. And so, you know, for a lot of those reasons that we've already been through, I think that there's a moral, a biblical, and a legal case for saying that, yes, abortion is murder. Yes, we should declare it murder. Yes, we should make it illegal. But in the case of the mother, considering where we are at in the culture and where women are at right now, we should enact mercy on these murderers.
So two quick things there. So the first one, again, I strongly object to the idea that we are showing them mercy by categorically saying you may commit child sacrifice without penalty. Again, I'm okay with showing mercy in an individual instance based on the facts of a case, which could be a trillion different facts that we could go. But again, I think in my view, it's cruelty to write a law saying you may, because you're driving, by the incentives that you're putting in law, you're giving them no reason not to choose child sacrifice. I mean, to me, that's a cruelty. And so I would say that's the first part.
How about a fine? How about a disincentive of, you know, a $5,000 fine? And again, that probably makes you squirm because it feels like I'm putting a price on a human life. That's not what I'm doing. But if our hang up is, you know, okay, we just need a law saying it's murder and we need some kind of penalty.
Yeah. But it's not murder.
Why not compromise? Why not compromise in this place where we have this assurance that, you know, because a lot of nasty things can happen, and there's differences between states. There's corrupt prosecutors. There's terrible things that can happen. You know, especially when you're trying to deal with the state of someone's mind, which is very hard. I mean, none of us can see someone's heart truly. I mean, they might leave some evidence on online in certain, but it's a very hard thing to do. Mm-hmm. So, you know,
for someone who's
why not come to a compromise where the pro-life movement and the abolitionist movement can come together on, okay, Let's put laws in place to say it's murder. Let's even enact penalties for the woman. Let's guarantee for this time in history, maybe that changes down the road when our culture changes and it's widely accepted and believed that this is wrong and evil and murder. But for now, in order to get this passed and for the protection of the woman in her vulnerable state, let's guarantee that she's not sacrificing life or limb for this.
You realize why that
it's illegal. We put a penalty in place as a strong disincentive and a statement that it's wrong, but we are building into our law an amount of mercy because this is a very distinct case that I would contend our current laws are not equipped to adequately handle. That's why I don't like these blanket like abolition bills and let's just trust the jury and the judge to make their own judgments on it. I don't think that our laws are yet well equipped to deal with what is a very special circumstance of abortion.
So the thing that I think we keep coming back to it, but like, do you think that the state of our culture right now is good or bad? Does it need to stay the way it is, or does it need to change?
It's bad. It's terrible. It's evil.
So why are you compromising with it and just giving into it?
What do you mean by that?
Because in a certain sense, we are wanting to change the way things are, change people's minds about justice, the value of human life.
So am I.
And so we're wanting to modify that. I believe that right now people generally know in their hearts abortion's murder, it's bad, and I shouldn't do it. But I can do it. I'm going to get away with it. I'm not going to get in trouble with it. And because of just sin, I'm talking men and women, because of sin and the pursuit of other covering up sin and all that kind of stuff, people murder their children. And I believe they do it under the color of law, with the covering and protection of law. And they feel like they're going to be fine. And so I think we need to change that. And part of the process of changing that is establishing just laws the way they should be and the way they should have been 50 years ago. And so we're advocating for changing the culture. You got to understand why we think that what you're advocating for is keeping them in their lack of knowledge, like keeping them thinking it's not really murder.
Or helping them to continue suppressing the truth, because when you don't press the truth all the way through.
Well, here's how I'd answer that just initially. I also believe that the culture is evil and that it needs to be changed. But it's evil in two different ways. One, it's evil in that it's unjust, and murder victims are not being given justice. The other way in which it's evil,
but you're advocating for continuing that.
But the other way in which it is evil is our culture is characterized by an extreme lack of mercy, an extreme excess of hatred and judgment towards other people. And I want that to change in our culture as well.
So when we say something like there's an inordinate amount of special mercy towards mothers who murder their children, like they're getting carte blanche immunity and mercy from the governing authorities who are supposed to establish justice, you're saying they don't already have that. So we need to make sure that they continue to have it. Like, do they already have it? Do mothers who take abortion pills already have immunity? I say they do, and that they shouldn't because they're committing an act of homicide. And I can say that and say abortion's murder, but there's still forgiveness for the sin of murder, but that doesn't mean it should be legal. I can say, hey, you know what? I'm not a governing authority. I'm not going to hurt you. I'm not going to go after you. I just want to tell you that you've murdered your child. And guess what? Good news. God forgives murderers. Let me tell you about David. Let me tell you about Paul. Let me tell you about... And tell them the good news. But it sounds like what you're saying is our culture doesn't show enough mercy towards women. So what we need to do is keep the laws giving them immunity the same. You see how that's a kind of a problem there?
Yeah, well, okay.
Because we're saying we need to change the culture. You're saying you need to keep it the same, or
I think that,
tell them
I see what you're saying. I
fine.
think the laws that grant women immunity don't translate as mercy because we haven't made it illegal.
They already have immunity.
Abortion is...
The suggestions of
Right.
retaining immunity come from pro-lifers opposing bills that would say we need justice for preborn children. They're proclamations from the pro-life movement to the legislators saying, do not treat abortion as murder. This bill to treat the act of abortion as murder is on your plate. Vote against it because we want the women in our culture to know that we are for them never being punished. And so that's the declaration from the lobbyists, from the pro-life movement leaders, from guys like you. Like, you should not be in trouble for this. But that's already how it is. You're just, at the end of the day, you're just advocating that abortion should not be abolished for mothers. You're not advocating for a new law. You're advocating keep it the way it is.
No, I think I would, again, I think this is kind of where people talk past each other. My goal is of abolition too. Our differences are our strategy, and secondly, our posture towards the mothers and the amount of mercy that we're willing to give them.
But then it's not abolition as the end goal, because the mother will always have the right to, order pills online and have the abortion, right?
Not necessarily. Again, I can't say what things are going to look like, 50 to 100 years from now.
She'll always have the right to perform abortions however she's able to, given her circumstance. If she has access to pills, then pills. If she has access to herbs, then herbs.
Yeah.
But she always will have the right to do it without penalty. And we would say just emphatically, like, how can that be called abolition or the same goal? I would say abortion fundamentally is legal if the mothers having them are able to do them. But one other point, real quick, I wanted to come back to that you brought up was the way in which it kind of makes us squirm, and you argued rightly so, at the idea of a woman receiving the death penalty. And my question for you, I there's a degree to which that's true, but like, let's say that a woman were to drown her 2-year-old in the bathtub. I would say, as much as I hate the idea of anyone dying, I would say that there must be justice for this child. I would say that God's law commands this.
But I squirm for her. I do.
And the squirminess is something, in this case, when the just penalty is this, assuming that all the facts of the case, she knew what she was doing, she wasn't coerced, all that being assumed in the thought experiment, I may squirm, but I need to get to a place where I don't, because I love that child so much that I don't want laws that allow people to just get away with this in every single case. And so, like, what would you say, like, in the case of a mother who were to kill her newborn, her toddler, her teenager, would you say that she should face something like the death penalty or a murder charge that led to life in prison?
If she did it in a state of postpartum depression or mental anguish?
No, a mother who was waiting on abortion pills to come in the mail, or she had a abortion appointment set up, or she was wanting to go. She lived in Oklahoma and she was wanting to drive to Albuquerque to abort her baby. It's 24 weeks.
Yeah, and
got into a car wreck, had a premature birth, and the 24-week-old child was out of her. And this was a baby that she was intending to murder, intending not to have, and she either stones the baby there or kills it later in a NICU. I mean, it's a harsh thing, but it's not outside of the realm of people doing this. Like, that mother who kills her 24-week gestation child outside of the womb, but has the same whatever justifying condition. She was planning to have an abortion. Just something happened, the baby came out.
Yeah,
like,
well, and that's
under what
that's
you're saying,
go back to
she can't be held responsible for killing that baby.
And that's where I would say that killing a baby outside of the womb that you see is a fundamentally different kind of murder than abortion. It's still murder.
That is what pro-choicers tell us, like infanticide.
No.
Like, they'll say it's like, so it's okay to kill a baby as long as you're killing the baby inside the womb. If the baby is outside of the womb, you can't kill it because it's different, because you can see it. I've heard that exact thing.
I'm not saying that it's okay. And I'm not saying that it's not murder. I'm saying that it's a fundamentally different kind of murder in terms of the heinousness of the crime. And we talked about this earlier. That, let's use extremes. There's a difference between stalking women in the bushes and dragging them into your car and murdering them. There's a difference between that and a 15-year-old girl taking some pills that her mom gave her. I mean, like, that's a wide spectrum, but that's different. That's a different level of heinousness.
We would agree and say that the law should take all those facts and consider them and possibly treat them with a different sentence. We are the side saying to take the facts in different degrees into consideration, but then your side is no, they're all the same. They're all, or at least legally speaking, maybe not morally, but legally should all be treated the exact same. They're innocent. They've committed no crime.
Yes.
Blanket immunity.
No, we're not saying they're innocent and they've committed no crime, but we are saying, I think
that is what the law says.
Blanket immunity. So there's the woman who doesn't know what she's doing. She's kind of dumb and she aborts her baby. Then there's a woman who absolutely knows what she's doing. The laws suggested and lobbied for by pro-life leaders, the movement that you're a part of, are saying no. It's unequivocal. No mother should ever be prosecuted for an abortion. No law should be passed that would ever lead to a situation where any mother anywhere,
and there's just no
because
way
of what you're saying,
say
there's
it's not
special
committing a crime.
dispensation for mothers to murder their babies.
It is saying you are not committing a crime. I don't think there's any way, whether it's just or unjust to say it, you are saying you've committed no crime. This law doesn't apply to you. That is what the law is saying.
Even if you say, oh, and you're guilty in a moral sense, the law doesn't say that.
That's where I disagree. I mean, I think you can say someone's guilty of a crime. You can even write a law that makes it a crime and write into that law a clause for mercy. And I think that's warranted. I think that's warranted in this case. I just do.
So there's this again, I don't want to get nasty with it or whatever, but this is something that people are cooking out there. But so attraction to children, right? In this sort of, so a lot of pedophiles are victims of previous pedophiles. Like their sexuality was screwed up and messed up by some evil man touched them when they were 8. And so now they're 40 and they're touching an 8-year-old because sin begets sin and all this kind of stuff. And they've got this overwhelming urge and it's just, and then they screw up and then they're molesting their nephew or whatever and they get caught.
Yep.
Should there be a special dispensation of mercy and grace on people who were molested that turn out to be molesters? And we should, therefore, for them, they should not get in trouble for molesting kids because of their situation.
Okay, well...
And they may actually even believe it's okay. They might actually think, you know what? This is the way God made me, to have same-sex attraction towards children. I want it registered as one of the genders or whatever.
Yeah.
I want it. This is my form, Have you guys, Babylon Bee alien, say it, It's just like there are people out there that think that, they were born this way.
Mm-hmm.
And they would want a special dispensation allowing them to do what they're doing. And they could give you all sorts of reasons for why they're doing what they're doing. And in a certain sense, I have a human like a desire. Like I feel bad for the person who's been molested and so screwed up as a child, and they're now doing it. And I feel bad, and I like cry out for them. But then I'm like, but this doesn't affect what I think the law should be. I think the law should be you're not allowed to sexually molest children. Right. And if you do it, you're going to get in trouble. Even if you had all sorts of situations that you can say made it almost impossible for you not to do it. There still should be a law saying you can't do this.
Well, I think part of the reason that falls a little flat for me is the fact that it's already illegal. So
we'll say it wasn't.
It's not a discussion.
And we say it wasn't, and abolitionists were trying to abolish the laws protecting pedophilia.
I mean, I would say, we already kind of have some of this happening in law. I mean, I've seen.
Is it good or bad?
I watch a lot of Dateline, and you see some sick cases in some of these documentaries where, parents or adults groom kids and teach them to sexually molest others.
Yeah.
And that's often taken into account where, if someone was abused, their sentence or their punishment usually isn't as
like if they were if they were like programmed to do it. But that
exactly.
But you can lessen that based on their situation because there is a law against pedophilia.
Right, exactly.
But say there wasn't and you wanted to establish one.
I don't know.
Would someone come along?
I don't know.
Would someone come along and say, no, these people have been pedophiles for a long time?
The Corinthians, Roman citizens, pederasty was very common and widely accepted in the culture. Yeah. So, how would you go about, doing that?
Well, the thing is,
truth all the way through.
Yeah, you actually have already answered this question. In a culture where pedophilia had been legal for 50 years, and you showed up, you wouldn't want to punish the pedophiles on day one. That's what you've already said. You just switch out the word cannibal for abortion or cannibal for pedophile, and then you can kind of think through what you're advocating.
Yeah. I mean, would you...
Yeah, I'd punish the pedophiles on day one.
Would you start killing them day one?
No,
would you start executing?
I'd say,
day
guys,
one?
listen.
We got the law, or maybe the law's already in place because we're in Brazil and we have this on. So they've been breaking the law this whole time.
Yeah.
You start executing them right away.
Say, guys, here's the deal. Pedophilia, I guess in Brazil, pedophilia, executable crime. That's legit. But hey, this is the law. You've been breaking it. You've been breaking it for a long time. We're going to post this in the square. We're going to enforce this law. And then you enforce it.
And
because not only does it protect other children, it tells other pedophiles, don't do this. And yes, there may be people who start breaking it, but you're going to reform that culture way quicker than 50 years. If you come in and say, guys, this is against the law. I know you've been doing it for a long time, but we want a special dispensation for pedophiles here.
Yeah.
And maybe in 50 years, after we've told you that you're not going to be getting carte blanche immunity, we'll take that away from you. But over the next 50 years, we're going to
Here's again where it breaks down. I think this is another category area here because, again, I think abortion, a mother aborting her baby, is a unique situation, and I don't think it can be compared to pedophilia.
Well, you've made it cannibalism. There was cannibalism in the culture that you didn't want to show up and hang cannibals was a unique situation. That's why you made that analogy.
Each is unique in its own culture that we're talking about. Unique in the sense that culture has embraced that particular unique crime. And I think if you don't show up and say, here's the law, we're going to enforce this from day one, I don't necessarily, in most cases, I would say, you shouldn't prosecute or hang people for stuff that already happened in the past. I don't think that would be
retroactive,
no retroactive, no ex post facto. Yeah. But if you say, here's the law, we're not going to enforce it, again, you're only educating in the wrong direction. You're educating in keep doing it. As far as the law is concerned, keep doing this, and there's not going to be any punishment for it. If you don't come up and say, hey, this is a crime, we are from here on moving forward, if you do this, you will be prosecuted accordingly. You're just going to get more of it. Your culture is going to get certainly not better, but probably worse.
Yeah.
Because you're now even more explicitly teaching them this is not something that we're going to take seriously enough that you're going to get in any trouble if you do this.
I do wish that there was a way that, I wish there was one state where you could take like the majority of all the pro-lifers who say that they agree with abolition.
In theory,
make them all beholden to it, and have in a state them abolish abortion, treat it as murder. I would love to see what that does. The thing is, we can talk about thought experiments or anything, but we're trying to do it. We're trying not just in a state, but in all states and all nations. We're trying to establish that justice.
Why not go after the easy targets, though? We can't even.
Well, you've been going after the easy targets.
We haven't even managed to shut down Planned Parenthood, which is slaughtering babies en masse.
The reason is
why are we so hung up over how we should treat the mother when we haven't even managed to?
Well, we're not hung up on that. We're hung up on establishing justice. So So the thing is, though, is the reason that we can't get rid of Planned Parenthood is because Planned Parenthood isn't actually causing abortion. They're meeting a need.
I would.
We're going after
disagree with that.
We're going after. So I think human sin is the cause of abortion. I don't think it's an evil organization.
If Planned Parenthood shut down tomorrow, and just something else, whether it be pills or another replacement Planned Parenthood would take its place because it's in the demand. The supply is meeting the demand, and to certain degrees, maybe with advertising, increasing the demand. But it's not
absolutely. I think vastly increasing the demand. I think that Planned Parenthood is a sales organization that exists to sell abortion.
To certain degrees, yes.
They control our public education system. They write the sex ed that kids are taught from kindergarten because it's a sales pipeline because they want to sell abortion. And so, I think that, yes, there will always be demand at a certain level for abortion because we're all sinners and tragic, horrible things happen.
I'm just saying you can't get rid of Planned Parenthood.
Women are abandoned by husbands and left out in the cold and poor, and they feel like they have no. There's always going to be sin. There's always going to be a certain level of demand. I think that destroying Planned Parenthood would absolutely pulverize that level of demand. So, and I think it's an easy first target, and it's a good first step.
It's been the focus. That's why 50 years.
I think the errors. And again, we've been going so long. I know you guys. Thanks for sticking with me.
You said it. We do this all the time.
Are often not a matter of someone believing or proposing a wrong thing. Sometimes it's just a matter of emphasizing the wrong thing. Maybe what you're fighting for is a righteous thing, or it's technically true, but it's put out of order. And I think that's one of the things that I see with the abolitionist movement is that. The most heinous thing and the most heinous parties in this whole picture are not the primary targets. It's a matter of putting the cart before the horse.
No, our target is the act again. Our main target again is not the woman. That's what the New York Times or the National Right to Life letter would consider our target,
or the Babylon Bee, I guess.
But our target is the act, the target of the legislation we write, the target of our argumentation. Except when we're specifically having this debate, the target of our bills is the act of abortion itself.
Yeah, and it's
I think that the abortion industry would love that because they would love to push all the liability onto the woman and run away scot-free.
But we're not pushing liability on the woman.
If we were to pass these abolitionist bills, I wonder if we would start to see the abortion industry bring the full force of their money and power in the law to bear in protecting themselves from liability and so that they can punish the least powerful person, the most powerless person in this picture, which is the woman.
I don't want to speak up for Planned Parenthood, but I don't think their MO is going after women for getting abortions.
Sorry,
they do it already.
I don't understand. No. So Planned Parenthood, the reason I say that they're meeting a demand. So it's like saying this thing that we want to shut down Planned Parenthood is a thing that we ourselves will not shut down. I often say, let's make it, we are abolitionist. We are focused on going after the abortionist. Whoever the abortionist is, they are the one that is guilty of the crime of abortion. And whoever it is that's electing the abortion, whoever is choosing the abortion is the abortionist. And it's really easy to see in the case of the pill because the pill goes into the mouth and into the body through a hand, and it's the mother. So she's the abortionist, right? Whenever a mother and a father together decide they're going to go get an abortion, they get in a car and they drive their Lexus to the abortion clinic and they go in and they sit down, they sign some papers, and then they lay back, and then the abortionist performs a surgical abortion. They went to the abortionist, right? So they are part of the abortionist. That abortionist didn't wake up in the morning and go out into the culture and kill their baby without permission. So if you go after whoever is the principal cause of the abortion and you're just about abortion itself, you can say abortion's wrong and abortion should be abolished. And Planned Parenthood, like, you want to defund Planned Parenthood, criminalize abortion. You kill them, you destroy their model overnight. But like, to say we need to stop tax funder, like we can run campaign after campaign after campaign for decades against Planned Parenthood, and at the same time, out the other side of our mouth, say that there should be immunity for people who go to Planned Parenthood for abortion pills. Like, you're not solving the problem. I would say that the accusation of like we've got it flipped around is on the other shoe. Like, go after abortion, the act of abortion, in law, in culture, from the pulpit, in the press, in the media. This is murder. This is the law against murder applied equally to all people everywhere. And see how easy it is to get rid of criminal organizations like Planned Parenthood.
Yeah, justice and repentance are, again, we talk about low-hanging fruit, and we talk about the abortion industry, Planned Parenthood being the lower-hanging fruit. But again, you take off the lower-hanging fruit, and all you get is this, right? There's nothing that's accomplished.
Didn't come from Planned Parenthood.
It came from another country,
it's
right?
India.
It came from a pharmacy in India. And so there's nothing that like me ordering this, like say I'm a woman who's pregnant and I take these pills, there's no other actor that was a part of me ordering and taking these pills in Oklahoma. The only actors in me taking these pills are me, and then the abortion pill URL website where I ordered them, and then the pharmacy in India. And
you can hold all of them accountable.
And I'm the only one in Oklahoma. Yep. I'm the only Oklahoma actor, and so Oklahoma law can only impact me. And so it's completely, again, I think you can say something can be illegal without there being a penalty attached, but in the realest sense, in any meaningful, substantive sense, abortion is as legal in Oklahoma as it has ever been, and even easier and cheaper to obtain than it has ever been. And that's a result of the low-hanging fruit being gone and out of the picture in Oklahoma, and only having this as the option. Yeah. And I would say that, so there's the low-hanging fruit aren't, there's some senses in which educationally, if Planned Parenthood is doing less stuff, maybe that's helpful. But as far as the abortion problem, it is not them. It's the problem of the act of abortion being legal in Oklahoma right now.
These pills will never kill anyone.
Yeah.
But someone could use these pills to kill somebody. I know it seems cheap, but the whole guns don't kill people thing, people kill people. Like, so the low-hanging fruit are the only thing to go after. Really, the most important thing to go after is the act of abortion. Mm. Don't get hung up on you're being mean to women. I think that actually is one of the only ways to culturally argue against abortion, because you realize that in our culture, you've got this sympathetic card to play. These abolitionists are mean to women. So the pro-choicers say it about us, the pro-lifers say it about us, the pro-lifers and the pro-choicers are working together against the abolitionists who want to establish equal protection, equal justice for all humans. But it is a straw man to say, oh, we're bloodthirsty after women. I mean, we may not convince each other in this debate, but I think that should be at least one thing that comes out of it. We're going after the act of abortion.
That you're not bloodthirsty?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, if I were God, I wouldn't, the world would be a hellhole.
Well, and that's why it's good to have these face-to-face conversations instead of online, because, I mean, I got kind of piled on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, the last couple of weeks.
Twitter.
Is it called X and they're still called tweets?
I reject X.
Yeah, I think they're called posts now. I still dead name it. I call it Twitter.
Yeah, Joel, you're friends with Elon. Tell him to go back. Yeah. It's not right.
Yeah.
I thought being on Twitter made you friends with Elon. I've been telling people.
No, what was I going to say? Oh yeah, I mean, because I was getting piled on by people saying that yes, not only should we hang women, we should stone them. We should have public stonings of these women.
Who said that?
They're murders. They're no different than Hitler. I mean, again, this is the internet we're talking about here. I'm talking about anonymous people on Twitter that follow a lot of the abolitionist accounts. So I think there's that perception just from sometimes the online presence and the overall posture that makes it feel bloodthirsty. And I think that's why it's important to have these face-to-face conversations.
Yeah, I definitely don't see those comments.
I think you guys often get slandered as bloodthirsty. I get slandered as a Moloch worshiper who actually loves baby murder and wants it to continue for as long as possible. I mean, that's what people were saying about me on Twitter. So I think,
we definitely don't think
an
that.
in between there where the truth exists.
Yeah,
Hopefully.
you're accidentally worshiping Moloch. Does that make you feel better? No, just you're just allowing Moloch to continue to carry out what he's doing. That sounds really harsh. I'm sorry, but
I think it's a difference in strategy, and it's a difference in the level of. I'll continue to die on this hill. I think that abortion is a unique kind of murder that requires a unique dispensation. I think that women are in a very uniquely vulnerable spot, and it's also very easy to pretend or forget that these are human beings that we're killing because you never see them, and I think that is all worth considering in how we address this strategically. I think that again. I think there's a very fair case to be made for the other side, and you've articulated it very well tonight. For me, I think strategically, it is ill-advised to lead with this idea of
establishing
putting women
justice
in jail or executing them, depending on the state.
Well, we don't. That's why we don't lead with that. I mean, strategically. We lead with established justice for the preborn fatherless, equal.
But is that honest though? I mean,
yes,
are we being
honest.
Underhanded by not
established justice for the fatherless is Isaiah 1:16, 17 through 18.
How would you say that that's not honest or
that's what we want to
underhanded?
do? Establish justice for the fatherless.
Well, I mean, I not honest, but maybe leaving out the main thing.
Oh, we don't leave it out. It's not the main thing is establishing justice for the fatherless.
Shouldn't you guys? I mean, wouldn't it be more upfront to call, instead of calling yourselves abolitionists, to call yourselves prosecutorialists, or the difference here is we believe that the women should be prosecuted. That's the main distinctive here.
I think the abolitionists of slavery should have been called
and
what?
I think that the difference too is that I don't see a dissonance between abolishing abortion and giving the women a certain special immunity or dispensation. I know you disagree.
And I think to me it's the most
fair case, but
to me that's the most confusing point, because again, I just think I mean, you can say maybe you are able to write a law saying you can put the words on paper, it's a crime, but there's no penalty if you do it. Like you can put those words on a piece of paper, but in no meaningful sense, in no substantive sense, is it actually a crime? Is it actually abolished? It's legal to do. I think the definition. I think that the definition would help here. The definition of abolish is to formally put an end to a practice, and in no sense are you formally putting an end to a practice if the law says you can do this without any legal penalty whatsoever.
Well, then why not institute a light penalty?
For the reasons about the law being a tutor, for that being dehumanizing to children.
That's how you don't abolish it.
Again, that's how you say to the culture, we don't really think this is murder.
See, you say that you say that you can't change on this, and I would just say maybe you can. I might say the same thing. I might say I really can't change on this, but I would articulate the reason I can't change on this isn't because I think solely what I'm advocating for is the most practical and strategically wise thing. I think that what we're advocating for is the true good thing that God would say, go and do it this way. Like every time he said, do something, do it this way. He, reject incrementalism, embrace immediatism. I think that's the teaching of Scripture. Sin, whether you're talking to individual, national, state, whatever, when you have something evil that's going on and you see that it's evil, don't give your hand a light sentence or your eye a light sentence, gouge it out. When Pharaoh offers increments, don't take them. Say not a hoof is remaining in Egypt. So I think we do think that our strategy is coming from the revealed word of God. So we don't hide that. We really do think that what we're saying is what God says. This is how you deal with evils. At the same time, we do think that it is, because God said it, it is best and it is most true, and it's the thing that he'll help with. So we think that we're doing something that God commanded, that he wants to help and come along with, and that it will bear the most fruit, save the most babies, and have the greatest practical effect, because it is truth with the support of the author of truth. And so that's the project that we're all about doing. And it's contra to the project of kind of like, I'm not going to say that it's exactly what you're suggesting, but the general product of the pro-life movement is, yes, there may be a thing that God has said do, but we don't think that it's practical or it's best, and it kind of comes across as harsh, or, all these different things. We're going to do this other thing because it's going to have a better effect. And I just say, just appealing to you as a Christian to Christian, this won't work with any of non-Christian audience. Like, I don't think God is going to get behind the general approach that you're advocating. And I think we have 50 years, if you're a pragmatist at heart, we have 50 years of proof that God is not going to get behind, or that the nation is not going to repent because of the last 50 years of focused on incrementalism and buttressing and supporting this special immunity from others. Because I don't think you're advocating for anything at all new. I think you're advocating for keeping things the way they are. But I think that God tells us, do it this way, and lo, I'm with you until the end of the age. Make a disciple of your nation. And so we are trying to do that, and we do believe that he will help us. And as soon as
why do you think God is telling you to do it this way, and what do you think he's? Do you think
just script? I'm just talking about scripture.
Do you think God is specifically dictating that we punish the mothers severely?
No, I think God is specifically dictating to establish justice for the fatherless, right? Uh-huh. To not write iniquitous decrees that show partiality and that don't allow the fatherless to continue to be prey.
Genesis 9:6.
And he wants us to establish justice and mercy. And at the end of the Old Testament, that final prophet's like, he has told you, oh man, what you ought to do, establish justice and mercy and walk humbly with your God. So what we're trying to do is walk humbly with our God. Our God has said, I want justice to roll down like rushing waters.
And he specifically defined justice in the context of, if you shed man's blood, by man shall your blood be shed. Yeah. Like that's like the fundamental, like the what he says after the flood that you talked about, like the Mosaic or the Noahic covenant. Like that's like the foundational principle of one of them of government
to all people,
itself.
Not just Jews, all humans. And where they're talking about Leviticus 20, where he's basically like, if you are allowing murder to go on in your midst and you're not punishing it, like that's an actual Leviticus 20. If you're not actually punishing the murderer, I turn my face against you.
Specifically child sacrifice.
It is child sacrifice. Yeah. And so that's why I'm saying I would not get behind anything if I thought God had turned his face against people who get behind those things. And so everyone quotes the justice and mercy part of Micah 6:8. But the walking humbly with God is where the believer who believes not only that the word of God is true, but that God is living and active and works through his people. And we know what God wants us to do, not because he's given us, like, I don't hear an audible voice, God saying, like, the straw man, go punish mothers. But I see a very visible, from the extant manuscripts all the way down today, establish justice for the fatherless without partiality, without iniquity. I want you to do this. I do think this about child sacrifice. I do hate it. It never even entered my mind that you guys would do this. Do away with it. If you don't do away with it, I'm going to punish you and your people and your culture and cut you off, all that kind of stuff. And so having that in there, that is what drives an abolitionist and the abolitionist movement to basically say, we're going to do what God says, because even though it doesn't always line up with our pragmatism or the water we've been drinking for the past 50 years, we're going to walk humbly with God, and we're going to submit.
That's the thing. I think I read that same passage of Scripture, and I read the words, walk humbly with thy God, and I think about the fact that we are all sinners, and we're not just all sinners. According to Jesus Christ, we are all murderers, because we have, all of us have hated our brother in our heart before, which according to God's law, you've heard it said, but I say to you, we are all guilty before God in his holy law, not the stuff on earth. We are all guilty of murder, and we all deserve death. The wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is eternal life.
But governing authorities shouldn't put up laws against hating that are punishable by death. So we understand the differences in the categories.
Right. So all I'm saying then is that when I read that, and when I think about what Christ has done for me and what I've been forgiven and what I've been spared from, my inclination in all of this is to show mercy wherever I possibly can, especially to the weak, the powerless, the vulnerable. And again, I don't want us to lose those ideas, because that idea of protecting the weak, the powerless, the vulnerable, the oppressed has been taken over by Marxists, and they've really made that whole conversation toxic. This idea that if you're oppressed, you can do no wrong. I'm not saying that, but there is absolutely a biblical basis for special care and special mercy for those who are weak and again, I know you can take this right back to the unborn baby, the weakest and most powerless of all. But I think that in the case of abortion, the mother, when compared to the boyfriend, the husband, the abortion industry, the culture, the mother and the baby are the two weakest and most vulnerable and most powerless people in this picture. And so my inclination is, in addition to fighting for justice and for the life of that baby, is to show special mercy to the mother wherever possible, wherever I can.
But as a juror, again, it comes back to the juror versus lawmaker, because I absolutely, in certain cases, yes. But again, I would say...
Isn't that partiality, though? Because we always talk about partiality.
Well, no, because it depends on the facts of the... As a juror, you're looking at the facts of the case. And so the facts of the case may warrant certain, like, I'm going to treat this person different than this person, not based on I'm judging who they are. This is a woman, this is a man, black, white, old, young. I'm saying the facts of the case, the act that was committed, the facts around the act.
So here's the final point I'll make, I guess, is that yes, what I'm saying is that in this case, considering where we're at, I would not trust that decision to a jury or a prosecutor at this point in time in our culture.
But we're talking about writing a law.
I would feel... I'm talking about determining the level of heinousness of a crime, whether or not the mother knew what she was doing, all of those things. I would not trust that to a judge, a jury, a prosecutor at this point in time.
I
would prefer to build something in legislatively to make sure that these women are protected.
Yeah.
Like, see what happens, see how we respond to it once Planned Parenthood is dead, once, the pill is eradicated. If then we still see women with very hard hearts and full knowledge of what they're doing, self-medicating and aborting and using coat hangers, okay, then I think that there's a next step that needs to be taken and new considerations that need to be brought.
And a future Wilberforce will write that same exact passage that he read.
No, because slavery is an abortion. They're both evils and they're both grave injustices.
No.
But
the passage was about how
a slave owner is not
talking about slavery.
A vulnerable pregnant mother.
I'm saying a future
slave owner.
He's running a plantation.
See what I mean?
He's running a plantation and he's got lots of needs and stuff. What I'm saying is that at the end of all the delaying and substitute and all that kind of stuff, whenever you said that maybe in 50 years, turns out we got rid of Planned Parenthood, we did this, we lightened the fine, and then in 50 years they're still doing it, which is what we would say. And we'd say that that's what Scripture tells us. If we don't establish, I keep on quoting it just for anyone who's watching or thinking about it. It's Ecclesiastes 8:11. If you don't execute justice swiftly, the hearts of the children of men are swift to do evil, run to do evil. And so that's where a lot of this difference hinges upon. But what I'm saying is at the end of it all, after you say there's been 50 years of your case of doing what you're doing, and we've got 75 million murdered or 65 million, however you count it, it's probably hundreds of millions, right? And at the end of another 50 years, you're saying, let me just try this out. At the end of another 50 years, I'm saying there could be a future Wilberforce, not talking about slavery, don't get hung up, just some person who looks back on it and says, They did all that stuff that Joel Berry and his friends suggested, and here we are. They're still doing it. The main people keeping abortion from being abolished through that entire period were the people arguing that there should be immunity for committing the act of abortion if you are the mother. And they kept abortion legal for all those years. That's what I'm like. Our position, I think we've laid out the position.
Yeah, that's possible. I mean, we could look back 50 years, 100 years from now, and I'm completely wrong about this.
Yeah, and that's not like an arguing point. I'm just saying like that's generally why we make historical arguments, because we're saying, look, we can't look forward to 50 years, but we can look back. What delayed the abolition of the slave trade for 20 years? What delayed the abolition of chattel slavery for 50 years? It was the proposal of gradual schemes or regulatory schemes, and this idea that you can't really punish slaveholders for doing the thing that they just need to do in order for us to have the textiles that we need. Like, you got to understand their plight. You can't just punish them. There was a lot of argument about that. So I think the reason we use the historical stuff is because we've kind of already seen this, and we're trying our best to make a case for the pragmatist. Hey, actually, not calling sin sin and treating it as sin leaves it to fester in the culture. I did, because we were quoting, I don't want at the end of the day people to think that Abolitionists Rising or Babylon Bee just throws out verses outside of their context. So I was like, okay, Micah 6:8, he has told you, O man, what is good and what does the Lord require of you, but to do justice and to love kindness and to walk humbly with your God. 9, the voice of the Lord cries to the city, and its sound wisdom to fear your name. Hear of the rod and of him who appointed it. Can I forget any longer the treasures of wickedness in the house of the wicked and the scant measure that is accursed? Shall I acquit, this is verse 11, shall I acquit the man with wicked scales and with a bag of deceitful weights? So the actual context of the verse that you say you read it differently, the reason I read it differently is because the context of the passage and the context of all passages where God says, I want you to establish justice and mercy, is usually justice against the destruction of children, the destruction of women, the destruction of sojourners, the destruction of the poor, so on and so forth. And it's always coupled with the don't acquit the guilty. And after this whole debate and discussion, whether between us on this program or the wider argument, it really is coming down, I think, to a point is the pro-life movement and its people want to acquit the guilty. The abolitionists do not, in the pursuit of establishing justice, want to acquit the guilty. If there are people guilty of child sacrifice, we do not want to write laws telling them they are not guilty or they're less guilty. We just don't want to acquit the guilty. We know the laws against murder and that they are just, and we don't want to not only do them, but give approval to those who do them, which is Romans 1:32. Mm-hmm. And so it all boils down to this.
And my answer to that would be that Jesus came along and kind of changed the equation a little bit. And since then we've had 2,000 years of Western civilization and common law kind of evolving around this thing that Jesus introduced.
Romans 1:32 is written after Jesus.
What does that say again?
I'll read it.
Those who give they do things that deserve to die, and also those who give approval.
Yeah, Romans is talking about a culture that's run amok and, whatever, debauchery. It's basically a culture like ours. You got men sleeping with men, women with women. You got a worshiping of the creation.
Well, okay, and then
global warming, of evolution, all this kind of stuff.
Paul and Jesus said that we're all murderers, and Paul said we all deserve to die.
But you see the category error between like sin deserving spiritual death versus you've committed a crime on earth that does concern the civil government and the sword.
Yeah.
Versus a sin. So there's two separate categories there of what the civil government is ordained to to punish versus the spiritual consequences of sin.
And Jesus isn't
death.
abolishing laws against
Altogether.
murder.
Yeah.
Like it sounds like what you're saying is that like Jesus changed all the jots and tittles to where there's now legal murder.
That when Jesus came onto the scene, the way we practice law started to change.
I think there was mercy.
This idea of the logos in the inner life of people being taken into account when in the past it was often eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth.
I think Jesus wanted you to know that we're all guilty.
These aren't necessarily two separate categories. I think that Jesus and the gospel has very much been a part of how Western civilization and law and the enforcement of the law has evolved over the last 2 millennia. And I think that, again, going back to chivalry, going back to special dispensation for the woman, I think that all of that has kind of come with that. And
So how do you make the jump from Jesus came and the gospel and salvation and redemption to women in particular who commit the specific act of child sacrifice?
Why not just murder?
Uniquely among all of the other crimes that exist, this one uniquely because of the gospel and Jesus' incarnation and life, death, and resurrection. Uniquely, this crime we're not going to punish.
Like race-based hate crime. Why can't we not punish that because of the gospel?
Because race is meaningless.
Any crime, any kind of murder
between men and women are not meaningless. God made men and He made women. There is a headship and there's a hierarchy. There's a distinct difference, and so I don't draw a parallel between what the leftists do with race-based justice and social justice, which is disgusting, and it's absolutely against true justice. And
it's similar though to what you're saying,
and
is the reason I bring it up. It's like coming up with like sort of justifiable plights that certain groups of people feel that other groups don't.
It's only similar if those distinctions or those biases that we create are unjust. So going back to the definition of partiality is unjust bias for one person over another. That's not to say that bias for one person over another is not always or is always unjust. Does that make sense?
I think maybe James's mind, he's expressed kind of like that. This is a little hard to wrap your mind around because it kind of like, and it's kind of hard not to straw man it because I know you're not saying that the gospel and the revelation of the gospel and the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus has therefore changed civil statutes towards pregnant mothers in a way that it hasn't changed civil statutes towards poor dads. Like the kind of mercy, there's a special amount of mercy that came in with the resurrection that is available to young women who are not planning to do a child. Because I mean, I just don't see that. I don't know what that scripture.
I don't know.
Case
I mean,
it seems a weird thing to kind of put on the record.
I look at the way that Jesus behaved towards women. I don't know. He had so many opportunities when he could have probably ensured justice for some of these women, be they prostitutes, thieves, the woman who was caught in adoltery, and he never did that.
But we all understand the story, though, right?
I'm not saying that we should, that directly ports over to our legal system. We should just have mercy on everyone. I'm saying that it does affect it, though,
because I think that kind of mercy
does color and shape how we apply justice, because we have this thing with Jesus now where we've been forgiven and we have, I think, a much greater reason to show more mercy.
Civilly?
I think that when you let murderers out on the street, like in a Soros city, where someone murders someone and they're let out on the street by a Soros DA and they murder and murder again, I think that's horrific, primarily because these people are being let out to murder and murder again.
Like a second time abortion. But like, would
Again, that's wrong because of Ecclesiastes 8:11. When justice is not established, the feet of wicked people are swift to do evil. And so that applies equally to the George Soros DA in Chicago and New York.
The progressive liberal religious DA who says the reason that we're doing this is because of the gospel. Like, the social justice gospel, like where they get all religious about it and they quote, they'll say things like, I'm just being real frank with you, but like the arguments you're making are the same arguments that we hear from the secularist who will bring up like, well, Jesus forgives it's a very common thing. If you're out there on the streets talking about abortion, well, Jesus says, don't cast the first stone. Jesus forgives everyone, blah, 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 because they don't, and they're arguing from something that Jesus did or said in a conversation, 2,000 some odd years ago to say that there shouldn't be a law against abortion. And they will bring up like the woman who's brought. And I'm always thinking like, yeah, but all of us who study and know the Bible know what that passage is there for, right? It's basically just another instances of Pharisees and Sadducees bringing this woman to Jesus to test him. And he flips it on the head and said, which one of you is perfect? Cast the first stone. Because he knows what they're doing and he's busting them on it, right? But it's the same Jesus who says that, who says not a jot or tittle will be removed from my law. It's the same. He is the law. Like he fulfilled the law. He kept the law.
It, yeah.
He did not come to abolish the law. And it sounds like what you're saying in a literal sense. If I repeat it back to you, maybe you're like, no, that's not what I'm saying. But, just consider it. It sounds like you're saying that Jesus came and in his interactions and in his life, death, and resurrection abolished the law against child sacrifice. When previously in the Old Testament, God hated child sacrifice, and he thought that cities and cultures that did not punish it would come under his wrath.
Yeah.
But it's like Jesus didn't come to abolish the law, did he?
Yeah, no, I'm clearly not saying that.
Well, to modify it, to let murderers go free, to acquit the guilty. Jesus didn't come to acquit the guilty, like I have come to acquit the guilty in a legal, civil sense. I have come.
But he did, though. I mean, like we.
No.
Again,
to acquit the guilty of sin before God in judgment.
The Apostle Paul got away with his murders, and he was used by God to establish the church, throughout the world.
And he also says in Acts 25:11, if, however, I am guilty of doing anything deserving death, I do not refuse to die. So, of course, he deserved it. He certainly deserved spiritual death, but Paul would not say, because of the forgiveness of Christ, therefore, crimes that are worthy of punishments, whatever they be up to, including death, should not be meted out because of the gospel. So the fact that people committed sin are forgiven by God is one category. The other category is we must establish justice in the civil sphere. And that includes, as Russell talked about, not acquitting the guilty. And in this case, I think we have people who are guilty. But I think we've gone on.
He came to establish the law, say this is the law, and then say, you know what, and here's grace and mercy to be found in Christ alone. So, I mean, we can conclude with the gospel. Yeah. Even if we abolish abortion, make it a criminal act, bring all babies under equal protection and equal justice, and we do everything we're doing, we as Christians will still preach there is forgiveness for the sin of abortion. And when people say, what is the sin? We're going to say, oh, it's a very serious, severe one, murder. We're not going to say it's like a $500 fine kind of murder. Like Jesus came to forgive people of capital crimes. Like there are people in heaven who died because the state killed them. There are people in heaven who got away with capital crimes and the state didn't punish them. And all of that doesn't have any bearing on what kind of laws we should write. I think he has told us the kind of laws that we're to write, and he's revealed them in his scripture. And his scripture is the entire canon. And that Jesus, I think we've debated about a lot of stuff, but Abolitionists Rising, it's not a popular position, but we don't think Jesus came to change his law.
I think that's the other thing. I think there's a lot of talking in circles and a lot of talking past each other with this sort of thing. And I think there's a lot of disagreement in terms and the implications of those terms sometimes. If I may conclude,
go ahead.
And
I've only concluded 6 times already, so you can have the conclusion.
As a man, I think, and a man who follows God and reads the Bible and has, with the help of the Holy Spirit, interprets the Bible to the best of my ability, see what I see in it. I believe that it is righteous and just to go out of our way to protect pregnant women and find ways to show mercy to women who have abortions. I don't like that we are so quick to equate it to Moloch sacrifice, like these women are putting their babies their live babies in a fire, or their born babies in a fire, or equating it to killing someone outside of the womb. I'm not saying that abortion isn't murder. I think it's a different level of crime. I think the vulnerability and weakness of the woman who is pregnant warrants special consideration and special circumstances for mercy that might otherwise not be shown to other people. And I don't consider that partiality. I don't consider that unequal weights and measures. I think that is just given the reality of who women are, how God made men and women, and in light of the gospel and Jesus's behavior towards women, yes, there are murderers, and yes, we should find ways to extend mercy, even judiciously, or in the judicial system. So that's my insistence, I think.
Yeah.
And I think we would agree with you totally and entirely if Jesus said that that's what he came to do. If he said, "Dear civil magistrates, while I'm here among you, I want you to modify your laws in these ways," like I think we'd follow you.
And so, Joel, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate
you guys
your time.
are great. Thanks for being good sports, and apologize to your wives for me, would you?
Yeah, I don't know if this is going to be like a part 1, part 2, part 3.
This is going to be part 12.
No, we can turn it. This is like a Joe Rogan podcast. It goes and goes.
Yeah,
and goes.
man.